The red dot appeared without warning, a tiny circle of death dancing across Damien Voss's chest. In that frozen second, the entire private lounge held its breath. Champagne glasses stopped midair. Conversations died. But one person moved. A waitress nobody had noticed lunged forward, shoving one of the city's most feared men out of the line of fire just as the window exploded into a million glittering shards. Now every gun in the room was aimed at her trembling form. She'd just saved a killer's life and signed her own death warrant. If you want to see how this stranger survives the night and what happens when she becomes entangled with the city's most dangerous criminal empire, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Velvet Cage wasn't the kind of place you stumbled into by accident. Tucked behind an unmarked door on Ashford Street, it catered to a clientele that paid for two things: discretion and distance from the law. The drinks were expensive, the lighting was low, and the questions were non-existent. If you made it past the 300-pound bouncer with the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, you were either very rich, very connected, or very dead. Lila Hayes was none of those things. She was just a waitress trying to make rent. 23 years old, with dark hair perpetually pulled into a practical ponytail, Lila had learned early that the world didn't hand out favors. You worked, you survived, you kept your head down. She'd been serving drinks at the Velvet Cage for 8 months now, long enough to recognize the patterns. The regular businessmen who came in every Thursday. The couples who weren't married, at least not to each other. The groups of men in expensive suits who spoke in hushed tones and never, ever wanted to be remembered. Tonight felt different. Lila sensed it the moment she stepped onto the floor for her shift. The air was thicker somehow, charged with an electricity that made the hair on her arms stand up. Marco, the bartender who'd worked here for 15 years, was pouring drinks with unusual precision, his movements careful and deliberate. The other waitresses moved like ghosts, speaking only when necessary. "Table 7, Marco muttered as Lila approached the bar. He didn't look at her. "Dom Perignon, 4 glasses, don't linger." Lila's eyes flicked to the corner booth, table 7. Even in the dim lighting, she could make out 4 figures seated in the shadows. The booth itself was positioned perfectly. Back to the wall, clear sight lines to both entrances, far enough from the other tables to ensure privacy. Strategic, defensive, dangerous. "Who are they?" Lila asked quietly. Marco's jaw tightened. "People you don't ask about." She loaded the champagne and glasses onto her tray, her mind already cataloging details the way it always did. It was a habit born from a childhood spent reading people to stay safe, watching for the shift in her mother's mood that meant they'd be moving again, learning to spot the landlords who'd accept late rent versus the ones who'd change the locks. Some people called it anxiety. Lila called it survival. As she approached table 7, the conversations at nearby tables seemed to quiet. One of the men looked up, early 60s, silver hair, expensive watch. His eyes tracked her movement with the cold assessment of someone who'd spent decades determining who was a threat and who wasn't. She didn't make the cut, apparently, because he looked away dismissively, but the man at the center of the booth didn't look away. Damien Voss. Lila didn't know his name yet, but she'd remember his face for the rest of her life. Mid-30s, dark hair cut with military precision, a jawline that could have been carved from granite. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, if she'd owned a car. But it wasn't his appearance that made her pulse quicken. It was the way he occupied space. Even sitting perfectly still, he commanded the room with an authority that didn't need to announce itself. This was a man who'd never asked for anything twice. "Gentlemen," Lila said, her voice steady despite the warning bells clanging in her head. She set down the glasses with practiced efficiency, no wasted movement. "Your champagne." "Thank you, darling," the silver-haired man said without interest. Damien Voss said nothing. His eyes, dark as river stones, followed her hands as she poured. Not in appreciation or attraction, but with the focused attention of someone who noticed everything, who missed nothing. Lila finished pouring and stepped back. "Enjoy your evening." She turned to leave, and that's when she saw it. The reflection in the mirror behind the bar, barely visible, just a glint of movement in the building across the street. Upper floor, 3rd window from the right. The curtain shifted, and for a split second she saw the barrel. Her brain processed it faster than conscious thought could follow. Angle of approach, trajectory, Target. The red dot appeared on Damien Voss's chest like a droplet of blood, invisible to everyone but her because she was the only one standing at the right angle to see it against the dark fabric of his suit. Time crystallized. She didn't think, didn't plan, didn't calculate odds or consequences. She just moved. Lila's body slammed into Damien Voss with enough force to knock him sideways out of the booth. His champagne glass flew from his hand, arcing through the air in slow motion. The silver-haired man shouted something, a curse, a question, but his words were swallowed by the explosion of shattering glass as the window behind them disintegrated. The sound was deafening. Crystalline shrapnel filled the air like deadly snow, catching the light as it fell. Someone screamed, tables overturned, and then silence. The kind of silence that follows violence, heavy and suffocating. Lila found herself on the floor, her shoulder throbbing where she'd landed, champagne soaking through her white shirt. Above her, Damien Voss stared down with an expression she couldn't read. Not gratitude, not shock. Something colder, more calculating. Then the room erupted. Men materialized from nowhere. Or maybe they'd been there all along, invisible, until they were needed. Guns appeared with fluid, practiced ease. Lila counted 6, then 8, then stopped counting because every single barrel was pointed at her head. "Don't move," a voice commanded. "Hands where we can see them." Lila's hands shot up automatically, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The world spun around her in fragments, shattered glass glittering on the floor, overturned chairs, the black eye of a pistol inches from her face. I just saw—" The words tumbled out, incoherent even to her own ears. "Quiet." The man holding the gun was built like a linebacker, with a neck thick as a tree trunk. His finger rested on the trigger with casual familiarity. Not another word. Damien Voss rose to his feet with controlled grace, brushing glass from his suit. His expression hadn't changed, still that same cold assessment, as if he were watching a mildly interesting chess problem unfold. He touched his chest where the laser dot had been, then looked at the shattered window, then back to Lila. "Sir," the linebacker said, his voice tight. "We need to move you. Now." "In a moment." Damien's voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos like a knife through silk. Every person in the room went still. He studied Lila with those dark, fathomless eyes. "You saw the shooter." It wasn't a question. Lila nodded, not trusting her voice. "Before the laser appeared on my chest." Another nod. Her mouth was dry as sand. "How?" The mirror. Behind the bar. I saw the reflection." The building across the street, third window, the barrel. Damien's eyes narrowed fractionally. He turned to the linebacker. Victor, confirm." Victor spoke rapidly into a concealed microphone, his free hand still keeping the gun trained on Lila. A moment later, he nodded grimly. "Confirmed. Third floor, northeast corner, window 3. Sniper's already gone, but there's a rifle setup. Professional grade." The silver-haired man had recovered his composure, though his face was flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable, Damien. Someone knew you'd be here. Someone inside—" "Not here, Richard." Damien's interruption was soft but absolute. He looked at Lila again, tilting his head slightly. "Bring her." "Sir?" Victor's confusion was evident. "You heard me. Bring her to the back room. And get me Henderson on the phone. I want to know who owned that building and who's rented that floor in the last 6 months. I want traffic cameras, security footage. Everything within a 3-block radius." He paused, his gaze never leaving Lila's face. "And I want to know everything about her." Lila's stomach dropped. "Wait, I didn't do anything wrong. I just—" "Saved my life," Damien finished, "which is exactly why we're going to have a conversation." 2 men hauled Lila to her feet, their grips firm but not brutal. She looked around wildly for Marco, for anyone who might help, but the bartender had vanished. The few remaining patrons were being efficiently evacuated through a rear exit by more armed men who seemed to materialize from the walls themselves. How many people did this man have? They marched her through a door marked private into a hallway she'd never seen before, despite working here for months. The decor changed immediately, from the lounge's calculated opulence to something far more utilitarian. Concrete floors, fluorescent lighting, doors with serious locks. This wasn't part of the restaurant. This was something else entirely. They passed through another door into a room that made Lila's blood run cold. It was sparse. A metal table, several chairs, and absolutely nothing decorative. The walls were soundproofed panels. There were drains in the floor. This was a room designed for secrets and for making people tell them. "Sit," Victor ordered, pushing her into one of the chairs. He holstered his weapon but remained standing behind her, a silent threat. Lila sat. Her hands were shaking, so she clasped them in her lap to hide it. The champagne on her shirt had started to feel cold and sticky against her skin. She could smell it, sweet and expensive and completely at odds with the fear flooding her system. The door opened again and Damien Voss entered, followed by the silver-haired man and two others Lila hadn't seen before. One was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones. The other was younger, maybe 30, with the lean build of a runner and a scar that curved from his right ear to his collarbone. Damien sat across from Lila, his movements unhurried. He'd removed his jacket, revealing a white shirt and shoulder holster. The gun nestled there was sleek and black and very, very real. "Lila Hayes," he said, and her name in his mouth felt like a violation. 23 years old, originally from Portland, no criminal record, no college degree. You've worked at the Velvet Cage for 8 months. Before that, you were a waitress at 3 other establishments, none lasting longer than a year. You rent a studio apartment in Riverside for $900 a month, which you're currently 2 weeks late paying. Your car was repossessed 4 months ago. You have no family in the city. Each fact landed like a stone in still water. He'd learned all of this in less than 10 minutes. "How did you—" "I asked you a question earlier," Damien interrupted smoothly. "How did you see the shooter before anyone else?" Lila swallowed hard. "I told you. The mirror. The angle." "The mirror was behind you," the woman with sharp cheekbones said, her voice crisp and professional. "You were facing our table. You would have had to turn around, locate the mirror, identify the reflection, process what you were seeing, and react, all in the split second before the laser appeared. That's not possible for a normal person." "I'm observant," Lila said, hating how defensive she sounded. "You're more than observant," Damien said. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You assessed a threat that trained security professionals missed. You acted without hesitation. You put yourself in danger to protect someone you don't know." His eyes bored into hers. "Why?" "I don't know. I just saw it and moved." "People don't just move into the path of a bullet," the scarred man said. His voice was rough, like gravel scraping concrete. "They freeze, they panic, they save themselves. They don't save strangers." Lila's temper flared despite her fear. "Well, I'm sorry I didn't follow protocol. Next time I'll just let the bullet hit." Silence crashed down like a wave. Damien's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement? Interest? "You have a smart mouth for someone in your position." "What position is that exactly?" "The position where I saved your life and got guns pointed at my head for the trouble?" Victor shifted behind her, a warning rumble in his chest, but Damien raised one hand slightly and the big man went still. "A fair point," Damien conceded. "Let me rephrase. You're in a room with people who need to understand whether you're an asset or a liability. Whether what happened out there was heroism or theater. Whether you're working for someone or genuinely just had very fast reflexes." "I'm not working for anyone," Lila said through gritted teeth. "I'm a waitress. I carry drinks. I smile at customers. I go home and eat ramen because that's all I can afford. That's my entire life. I'm nobody." "Nobody sees what you saw," the sharp-eyed woman said. "I'm Diane Chen, head of security for Mr. Voss's operations. I've been doing this for 20 years. I had 6 people positioned around this room tonight, all trained to spot threats. None of them saw that sniper. But you did." Lila looked at Diane helplessly. "I don't know what you want me to say. I've always noticed things, details. It's just how my brain works. My mom used to say I saw too much, worried too much. I can't turn it off." Damien studied her for a long moment. Then he stood, turning to the window. One-way glass, Lila realized with a chill. Someone on the other side could be watching this whole conversation. "Victor," Damien said quietly, "did we find anything suspicious in her background? Any connections to rival organizations? Any financial transactions that don't add up? No, sir. She's exactly what she appears to be. No hidden bank accounts, no unusual contacts. Her life is simple, almost aggressively normal. Almost, Damien repeated. He turned back to face Lila. Here's what I think happened tonight. I think you have a gift. Call it hypervigilance, call it intuition, call it whatever you want. You see patterns other people miss. You notice details that fade into background noise for everyone else. And tonight, that gift saved my life. Lila said nothing. What could she say? The question now, Damien continued, is what I do with you. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You could let me go, Lila suggested, hearing the tremor in her voice. I promise I won't say anything to anyone. I'll quit the velvet cage. I'll leave the city if you want. I just want to forget this whole night happened. That would be the sensible option, the silver-haired man, Richard, said from his position near the door. Eliminate the variable. Too many people saw what happened. Lila's heart stopped. Eliminate? Richard is being dramatic, Damien said, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely disagree. But he's right about one thing. Too many people saw you tonight. By tomorrow morning, everyone in my organization will know that a waitress pushed me out of the line of fire. Some will think you're a hero. Others will think you're a plant. A few will wonder if you were the distraction while the real attack came from somewhere else. That's insane, Lila breathed. I just saw something and reacted. In my world, Damien said softly, there's no such thing as just anything. Every action has weight. Every decision has consequences. He paused. Someone tried to kill me tonight. Someone who knew exactly where I'd be, at exactly what time, in exactly which booth. That means I have a leak in my organization, a traitor. The word hung in the air like smoke. And you, Damien continued, his eyes locked on Lila's, are now the only person I'm certain isn't that traitor. Because if you were, you would have let the bullet hit. Lila's mind reeled. So what does that mean? What are you going to do with me? Damien glanced at Diane, who gave a slight nod. Some silent communication passed between them. I'm going to offer you a choice, Damien said. Option 1. You walk out of here tonight with $20,000 in cash. You use that money to leave the city, start somewhere new, and never speak about what happened here. We'll monitor you periodically to ensure compliance, but otherwise you're free to live your life. $20,000. Lila's rent, her debts, a fresh start, all wrapped up in a single offer. It should have been tempting. It should have been the obvious choice. But there was an option too. Or, she asked. Or, Damien said, you stay. You work for me. I have a feeling that your ability to see what others miss could be extremely valuable in finding my traitor. And after that, he shrugged slightly. We'll see. You want me to be what exactly? A spy? I don't know anything about your world. Exactly, Diane said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. You're an outsider. No history, no allegiances, no one would suspect you. You'd be invisible. Until I'm not, Lila shot back. Until whoever tried to kill you tonight figures out what I'm doing. Then what? Then you'd have the protection of this organization, Damien said. Which is considerable. Lila looked around the room at these people. Criminals, all of them. She had no illusions about that. Damien Voss wasn't a businessman or a philanthropist. He was something far more dangerous, and he was asking her to step into his world. I need time to think, she said. You have 30 seconds, Richard said coldly. Richard? Damien's voice carried a warning edge. He looked at Lila with something that might have been sympathy. I understand this is overwhelming, but time is a luxury neither of us have right now. Whoever sent that sniper will try again, and when they do, I need to know who I can trust. Lila's thoughts raced. $20,000 in safety versus what? Danger? Intrigue? A purpose beyond carrying drinks and dodging her landlord? But beneath all of that, one thought crystallized with absolute clarity. If she took the money and ran, she'd spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if Damien Voss would decide she knew too much, wondering if one day she'd see a red dot on her own chest. At least if she stayed, she'd see the danger coming. I'll stay, she heard herself say. But I have conditions. Ah, Richard laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. Let her speak, Damien said. Lila took a breath. First, I want my rent paid, all of it, including the late fees. Second, I want protection, real protection, not just a promise. Third, if I find your traitor, I want the option to walk away after. Clean, no monitoring, no check-ins, just out. Done, Damien said immediately. Just like that? Just like that. He stood, extending his hand across the table. Welcome to the organization, Miss Hayes. Try not to get yourself killed. Lila stared at his hand, elegant, dangerous, offering both salvation and damnation. Then she reached out and shook it. His grip was firm and warm and absolutely in control. Victor will set you up with a secure phone and brief you on basic protocols, Damien continued, releasing her hand. Diane will handle your security detail. You'll continue working at the Velvet Cage for now. It's good cover. But you'll report directly to me about anything you observe. Anything that seems off, no matter how small. What exactly am I looking for? Patterns, Diane said. People who act differently than usual. Money moving in strange directions. Conversations that stop when you enter a room. You said you noticed details. Prove it. And the sniper? Lila asked. Won't they try again? They will, Damien said calmly. Which is why, as of tonight, you're under 24-hour protection. Wherever you go, someone will be watching. It won't always be obvious, but they'll be there. The reality of what she'd just agreed to crashed over Lila like a wave. Her normal life, her small, safe, predictable life, was gone. She'd traded it for danger and purpose and the dark promise in Damien Voss's eyes. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Damien nodded. Earlier, when I pushed you out of the way, you didn't look scared or even surprised. Just curious. Like you were watching a science experiment. Why? For the first time that night, Damien smiled. It was a small expression, almost invisible, but it changed his entire face. Because, Miss Hayes, I stopped being afraid of death a long time ago. What interests me now is the people who think they can deliver it. He moved toward the door, then paused. The fact that you noticed that reaction tells me I made the right choice. Get some rest. Tomorrow, your real work begins. He left, taking Richard and the scarred man with him. Only Diane and Victor remained. This is crazy, Lila whispered. I don't know what I'm doing. None of us did when we started, Diane said, her voice gentler than before. But you have something rare. You see the truth of things. In this world, that's more valuable than any weapon. Victor handed her a sleek black phone. This is yours. It's encrypted, untraceable. Mr. Voss's number is already programmed in. If you see anything, and I mean anything, suspicious, you call immediately. No hesitation. Lila took the phone, feeling its weight in her palm. It was heavier than it looked. One more thing, Diane said. That instinct that made you push Mr. Voss out of the way tonight? Trust it. Always. In our world, hesitation kills, but so does recklessness. You need to find the balance. And if I can't? Diane's smile was razor sharp. Then you won't last long enough for it to matter. 2 hours later, Lila stood in her tiny studio apartment staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked the same dark hair, same tired eyes, same cheap work shirt now ruined with champagne stains. But something fundamental had shifted. This morning, she'd been nobody. Tonight, she'd saved a killer's life and joined his organization. The phone Victor had given her sat on the edge of the sink, its screen dark and silent. Lila picked it up, scrolling through the single contact. Damien Voss. Outside her window, she caught a glimpse of movement. A figure in a car across the street, watching. Her protection detail. Or her prison guards. Maybe both. Lila thought about the $20,000 she'd turned down. About the normal life she could have had. About all the sensible choices she could have made. Instead, she thought about the red dot on Damien Voss's chest. About the way she'd moved without thinking, without calculating the cost. About how some part of her had known, absolutely known, that this was the moment everything changed. She just hadn't realized how much. Her regular phone buzzed. A text from Marco, the bartender. You okay? Heard there was an incident. You're not fired, but take tomorrow off. We'll talk. Lila almost laughed. Fired. As if that mattered anymore. She typed back, I'm fine, see you soon. Then she turned off the phone and sat on her bed, the encrypted cell clutched in her hands. Tomorrow, she'd step back into the velvet cage. But this time, she wouldn't just be serving drinks. She'd be hunting a traitor. And somewhere out there, the person who'd sent that sniper would be planning their next move. Lila closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her new reality settle over her like a second skin. She'd wanted purpose, wanted to matter, wanted to be more than just another invisible girl grinding through another invisible life. Well, she'd gotten her wish. The question was whether she'd survive it. In the darkness of her apartment, Lila made a silent promise to herself. Whatever came next, she wouldn't freeze, wouldn't hesitate. She'd keep her eyes open, trust her instincts, and see the truth that everyone else missed. Because in Damien Voss's world, that was the only way to stay alive. And despite everything, the danger, the fear, the absolute insanity of what she'd agreed to, some small part of Lila felt more awake than she had in years. The red dot had changed everything. Now she just had to figure out what came next. The morning came too fast and brought with it a reality Lila wasn't ready to face. She'd slept maybe 2 hours, her mind racing through everything that had happened, every word Damien had said, every possible way this could go catastrophically wrong. When her alarm finally went off at 6, she was already awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering if yesterday had been some kind of fever dream. Then she saw the encrypted phone on her nightstand, and she knew it wasn't. Her first real task came at 7:15, delivered via text from a number she didn't recognize. Coffee. Merchant and Gray. 20 minutes. Come alone. Lila's stomach nodded. She typed back, "Who is this?" The response was immediate. "Your new employer. Don't be late." She threw on jeans and a sweater, ran a brush through her hair, and was out the door in 8 minutes. The black sedan she'd spotted last night was gone, replaced by a dark SUV with tinted windows. Her protection detail had changed shifts. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like being watched by ghosts. Merchant and Gray turned out to be a coffee shop in the financial district, the kind of place where lawyers and bankers grabbed their morning fuel before disappearing into glass towers. Lila spotted Damien immediately. He sat at a corner table, perfectly positioned to watch both entrances. A newspaper open in front of him, though she doubted he was actually reading it. He was dressed differently than last night. Dark jeans, a black sweater, leather jacket. He looked younger somehow, less like a crime lord and more like someone who might teach philosophy at a university. But his eyes, those dark, assessing eyes, were exactly the same. "You're early," he said as she approached. "Good. Sit." Lila sat, acutely aware of the other patrons around them. A woman in a power suit typing furiously on her laptop. 2 men in their 60s arguing about stock portfolios. A college kid with headphones, lost in whatever he was studying. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that a man who probably had a dozen murders attached to his name was sitting 15 feet away. "You look like you didn't sleep," Damien observed. "I wonder why," Lila said dryly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair point." He pushed a coffee cup across the table, black, no sugar. "Drink. We have things to discuss, and I need you alert." Lila wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. "Why are we meeting here? Why not your office or wherever it is you actually work?" "Because I don't know who's listening in my office. Because after last night, I trust approximately 3 people in my organization, and 2 of them are sitting at the table behind you pretending to read the business section." Lila glanced over her shoulder. The 2 older men arguing about stocks. "Of course, that's Marcus and Leonard," Damien continued quietly. "They've been with me for 15 years. They're clean. Everyone else is suspect until proven otherwise." "Even Richard? The silver-haired man from last night?" Something flickered across Damien's face. "Especially Richard. He's my oldest advisor, been with my family since before I took over operations, which makes him either absolutely loyal or the perfect traitor. I haven't decided which yet." Lila took a sip of coffee, buying herself time to think. "What exactly do you want from me? You said I'd help find your leak, but I don't know anything about your business. I wouldn't know what normal looks like in order to spot what's abnormal." "That's actually your advantage," Damien said. He folded the newspaper, setting it aside. "Everyone in my organization has been doing this for years. They've developed blind spots, patterns of thinking that make them predictable. You don't have those patterns yet. You see things fresh." Or I see nothing because I have no idea what I'm looking at. Then I'll teach you. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping even lower. Here's what you need to understand about my world, Lila. It operates on three principles: money, power, and loyalty. Everything, every decision, every alliance, every betrayal, comes down to one of those three things. The sniper last night? Someone paid for that. Someone with access to my schedule, my security protocols, my habits. That's not a random enemy taking a shot. That's someone inside my organization selling information. For money or power? Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe someone I trust is being blackmailed. Maybe they've been turned by a rival. Maybe they just decided I'm no longer the best bet for their future. His jaw tightened. What matters is finding them before they try again. A chill ran down Lila's spine. You really think they will? Try again? I know they will. Last night was expensive and risky. Whoever orchestrated it won't stop just because it failed. They'll adapt, change tactics, come at me from a different angle. His eyes locked on hers. Which is why I need you watching. You proved last night that you see threats before anyone else. I need that skill aimed inward. Lila set down her coffee cup, her hand steadier than she felt. Okay, so where do we start? Tonight. I have a meeting at one of my properties downtown. 10 people will be there, my inner circle. Department heads, key advisors, the people who actually run operations. One of them is my trader. I want you there, watching. They'll never accept me just showing up at a high-level meeting. You won't be at the meeting. You'll be serving drinks, playing your role as the waitress who happened to be in the right place at the right time last night. Victor will brief you on each person attending, their backgrounds, their positions, what they bring to the organization. Your job is to observe. Who's nervous? Who avoids eye contact? Who's too calm? Details, Lila. That's what you're good at. It made sense in a terrifying sort of way. And if I spot something suspicious, you tell me immediately. Not Diane, not Victor. Me. He pulled out his own phone, showing her a messaging app she didn't recognize. This is how we communicate from now on. Encrypted, self-deleting messages. Nothing we say can be intercepted or recovered. Lila watched as he typed her number into his contacts. The intimacy of the gesture felt strange. Adding someone to your phone was such a normal thing, yet nothing about this situation was normal. There's something else you should know, Damien said, his voice taking on a different quality. Harder. The sniper we recovered from last night's building, he was a professional. Former military, worked for at least 3 different criminal organizations over the past decade. And he was dead when we found him. Lila's breath caught. Dead? Single gunshot to the head, execution style. Whoever hired him made sure he couldn't talk. Damien's expression was stone. That level of planning, that kind of cleanup, this isn't amateur hour. Whoever's coming for me has resources and experience. Aren't you scared? The question slipped out before Lila could stop it. Damien studied her for a long moment. I told you last night I stopped being afraid of death. That's not quite true. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying without knowing who killed me, without having the chance to look them in the eye and understand why. He paused. Does that sound insane? A little, Lila admitted, but I think I understand it. Do you? She thought about her childhood, about moving from city to city with a mother who was always running from something, debt, bad relationships, her own demons, about learning to read people because not reading them meant walking into danger blindfolded, about the fear that had colored her entire life until last night, when she'd done something fearless for the first time and felt more alive than she ever had before. I spent my whole life being invisible, Lila said quietly, trying not to be noticed, not to make waves, not to matter enough that anyone would pay attention to me. And I was miserable. Safe, but miserable. Last night, when I saw that red dot, I didn't think about safety. I just moved. And afterward, when everyone had guns pointed at me, I should have been terrified. I was terrified, but I also felt real. Like I'd finally done something that mattered. Damien's expression shifted, something almost like understanding crossing his features. Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Or exactly where I'm going to get killed. Possibly both. He stood, leaving cash on the table. Too much for 2 cups of coffee, but probably pocket change for him. Victor will pick you up at 7 tonight. Dress like you did at the Velvet Cage. White shirt, black pants. Professional, but invisible. And Lila? She looked up at him. Trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long. Don't second-guess them now. Then he was gone, walking out of the coffee shop like any other patron, unremarkable except for the two men who folded their newspapers and followed him out at a discreet distance. Marcus and Leonard, the only two people he trusted. Lila sat alone at the table, nursing her cooling coffee and trying to process everything. Somewhere in this city, someone was planning Damien's murder. Someone with inside knowledge, professional resources, and enough ruthlessness to execute their own hired killer to cover their tracks. And she was supposed to help catch them. Her phone buzzed, her regular phone this time. A text from her landlord. Receive payment in full plus 3 months advance. Thank you for taking care of this. Lila stared at the message. She'd given Damien her conditions last night. He'd apparently wasted no time fulfilling them. Her rent was paid. She was protected. She was committed. There was no going back now. The rest of the day crawled by in agonizing slowness. Lila returned to her apartment and tried to sleep. Failed, tried to eat. Failed at that too. At 3 in the afternoon, her encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Victor. Briefing materials attached. Study them. No notes, no screenshots. Read and delete. She opened the file and found detailed dossiers on 10 people, complete with photos, backgrounds, and what Victor called operational notes, which Lila quickly realized was code for their roles in Damien's criminal empire. Richard Sterling, age 62, chief advisor, managed legal operations and political connections, former district attorney who'd crossed the line from prosecuting criminals to facilitating them, ruthless but loyal, or so everyone thought. Diane Chen, age 47, head of security, ex-FBI, recruited after she'd been forced out for using questionable interrogation methods. Brilliant strategist with a perfect track record, no known weaknesses. Marcus Webb and Leonard Cross. The two men from the coffee shop, ages 64 and 66 respectively. Enforcers who'd grown into advisory roles. Completely loyal to Damien's father before his death, transferred that loyalty to Damien. Clean records in the organization. Multiple bodies in their wake outside it. Lila continued reading, committing faces and names to memory. Thomas Crane, money launderer. Jennifer Zhao controlled the port operations. David Santos ran the protection rackets. Each one a key piece of Damien's empire. Each one potentially the traitor who wanted him dead. By the time Victor's black SUV pulled up outside her building at 7, Lila's nerves were strung tight as piano wire. She'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on the same outfit she wore at the Velvet Cage. White shirt, black pants, her hair pulled back. Invisible. Professional. Exactly what Damien wanted. Victor didn't speak during the drive downtown. He just handed her a small earpiece and a pin that looked like decorative jewelry but was actually a camera. "Wear the earpiece under your hair," he said, his voice all business. "If you need to communicate something urgent, touch it twice and whisper. We'll hear you. The pin goes on your collar. It'll give us a view of the room. Don't draw attention to it." Lila fitted the earpiece carefully, grateful her hair was long enough to hide it. "Has there been any progress on finding who leaked Damien's location last night?" "We're working on it. The building where the sniper set up was owned by a shell corporation. Takes time to trace those, but we'll find them." He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You did good last night. Not many people would have moved that fast." "I didn't really think about it." "That's what made it good. Thinking gets you killed. Reacting keeps you alive." They pulled up to a building that looked abandoned from the outside. Broken windows, faded paint, graffiti on the walls. But Lila noticed the security cameras hidden in the deterioration, the reinforced door barely visible in the shadows. This was another one of Damien's properties, dressed up to look like nothing worth noticing. Inside, the deception continued. The ground floor was genuinely abandoned, full of debris and forgotten furniture. But an elevator in the back, new, well-maintained, completely at odds with the decay around it, took them up to the 3rd floor. When the doors opened, Lila stepped into luxury. Hardwood floors, expensive furniture, art that probably cost more than she'd make in 10 lifetimes. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, though she noticed the glass was tinted and probably bulletproof. This way, Victor said, leading her to a conference room dominated by a massive table. Place settings were already arranged: 10 seats, crystal glasses, bottles of expensive liquor. Diane appeared from a side door, dressed in a sharp black suit. You're early. Good. Here's what you need to know. You pour drinks, you clear glasses, you don't speak unless spoken to. Your background decoration. No one will pay attention to you, which is exactly what we want. Questions? What if someone asks me something about last night? Give them nothing. You're shaken up. You don't want to talk about it. Play the traumatized waitress. It's not far from the truth. Diane's expression softened slightly. You'll do fine. Just watch and listen. That's all we need. The guests started arriving at 7:30. Richard came first, looking distinguished in a navy suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He nodded to Diane, but didn't acknowledge Lila at all, which suited her fine. Thomas Crane arrived next, nervous energy radiating off him like heat. He kept checking his phone, his fingers drumming against the conference table. Lila filed that away. Nervous could mean guilty, or it could just mean nervous. Jennifer Zhao entered with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were untouchable. She ran port operations, which meant she controlled what came in and out of the city. Drugs, weapons, people. If it moved through the harbor, she had a hand in it. One by one they gathered, these architects of Damien's empire, settling into their seats with the ease of people who'd done this countless times before. Lila moved among them like a ghost, filling glasses, clearing empty ones, watching everything. Damien arrived last, and the room's energy shifted immediately. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Postures straightened. All attention focused on him like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Damien said, taking his seat at the head of the table. I assume you've all heard about last night's incident. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. What you might not know, Damien continued, his voice carrying that quiet authority that made people lean in to listen, is that it wasn't random. Someone with detailed knowledge of my movements hired a professional sniper. That same someone then executed the sniper to prevent him from talking. This was an inside job. The room erupted, voices overlapping, some angry, some defensive, some demanding answers. Richard raised a hand and the chaos subsided. Damien, that's a serious accusation. Are you certain? Could it not have been? I'm certain, Damien cut him off. The question isn't whether we have a traitor. The question is who. Lila watched faces as he spoke. Thomas Crane had gone pale. Jennifer Zhao's expression was unreadable. David Santos, the man who ran protection rackets, looked genuinely angry. Marcus and Leonard sat stone-faced, their eyes constantly scanning the room. I want to know where each of you were yesterday between 4 and 6 p.m., Damien said. And I want to know who you told about my location at the Velvet Cage. This is absurd, a woman named Patricia Coleman said. She handled real estate acquisitions. We're all loyal to you, to this organization. Loyalty is proven through actions, not words, Damien replied coldly. So prove it. Account for your time. One by one, they went around the table. Business meetings, phone calls, operational details. Each alibi sounded plausible. Each person seemed genuinely offended by the implication of betrayal. Lila refilled glasses and watched. She noticed Thomas Crane's hand shaking slightly when he spoke. Noticed how Jennifer Zhao never quite made eye contact with Damien. Noticed that David Santos kept glancing at the door, like he was calculating escape routes. But it was Richard who caught her attention most. He sat perfectly still, perfectly composed, his expression sympathetic but controlled. Too controlled. Like a man who'd prepared for this conversation and knew exactly what to say. Sir, Lila heard Victor's voice in her earpiece, so quiet she almost missed it. Second camera just picked up movement in the stairwell. Someone's here who shouldn't be. Lila's heart rate spiked. She touched her earpiece twice, the signal for urgent communication, and whispered while pretending to adjust glasses on the serving cart. How many? Stand by. Damien was still talking, still interrogating his people, completely unaware. Or was he? Lila saw his eyes flick briefly toward the door, saw his hand move almost imperceptibly toward his shoulder holster. He knew. The door to the conference room burst open and chaos exploded into the carefully controlled space. 3 men in tactical gear flooded through the door, weapons raised, moving with military precision. But Lila's brain had already processed what everyone else was still registering. These weren't random attackers. They wore the same security badges as Damien's own people. They knew the building layout. They'd bypassed every checkpoint to get here. This wasn't an outside threat. This was the inside job manifesting in real time. Down! Victor's voice exploded in her earpiece, but Lila was already moving, not away from the danger like every survival instinct screamed at her to do, but toward it. Toward the pattern she'd seen that no one else had noticed yet. Richard Sterling had shifted in his chair a fraction of a second before the door burst open. Just a slight adjustment of his position, his hand moving to his inner jacket pocket. Not surprised, prepared. "Richard!" Lila shouted, her voice cutting through the erupting chaos. "He knew they were coming!" Everything happened at once. Damien's gun was already drawn, his body moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd survived countless attempts on his life. Marcus and Leonard were up and moving, their weapons appearing like magic. The three tactical operatives opened fire, but they were aiming at Damien's seat, where he'd been sitting, not where he was now. Richard's hand emerged from his jacket holding a small pistol, his face contorted with an emotion that might have been rage or desperation or both. The distinguished advisor, the loyal counselor, the man who'd been with Damien's family for decades, his mask had finally cracked. "You were supposed to be dead already." Richard's voice was raw, nothing like his usual cultured tones. "Last night should have ended this." The conference table erupted in pandemonium. Some of Damien's people dove for cover. Others reached for weapons. Thomas Crane was screaming something incoherent. Jennifer Zhao had somehow produced a gun from somewhere and was aiming it at the tactical team. But Lila's focus narrowed to a single point. Richard's pistol was tracking toward Damien, who was engaged with one of the tactical operatives and hadn't seen the betrayal unfold behind him. She didn't think, didn't calculate, just grabbed the nearest thing, a crystal decanter full of whiskey, and hurled it with everything she had. The heavy glass caught Richard in the temple with a sickening crack. His shot went wide, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling instead of Damien's back. He staggered, blood streaming down his face, shock and fury warring in his expression as he tried to reorient his weapon. Diane was there in a heartbeat, her gun pressed to Richard's head. "Drop it, now!" Richard's pistol clattered to the floor. The fight was draining out of the room as quickly as it had erupted. Two of the tactical operatives were down, taken out by Marcus and Leonard with brutal efficiency. The third had his hands up, clearly realizing his mission had failed catastrophically. Damien stood in the center of the wreckage, his gun still drawn, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. His eyes swept the room, taking in every detail, before landing on Richard. 15 years, Damien said quietly, and somehow that quiet was more terrifying than shouting would have been. "My father trusted you. I trusted you. And this is how you repay that?" Richard laughed, a bitter sound that had nothing to do with humor. Blood dripped from the wound on his temple where Lila's decanter had struck. "Trust? You want to talk about trust? Your father promised me a partnership, equal shares, equal power. Instead, he gave me a salary and a leash. And when he died, you didn't even have the decency to offer me what I'd earned." "Earned?" Damien's voice dropped even lower. "You've been skimming for years. I knew about the Swiss accounts, Richard. The shell companies, the redirected shipments. I was building a case, waiting for the right moment to move. But you got impatient, didn't you? Decided to eliminate me before I could eliminate you." The revelation rippled through the room. Lila saw understanding dawn on face after face. Richard had been stealing from the organization while smiling and offering counsel. How much had he taken? How long had this been happening? "You knew?" Richard's composure cracked further. "If you knew, why didn't you act?" "Because I wanted to know who else was involved, who you'd bought, who'd been helping you." Damien glanced at the tactical operatives. "These men, for instance, they're not outsiders. They're security personnel from our own payroll, which means someone in this room helped you recruit them." Every eye turned to examine their neighbors with sudden suspicion. The paranoia that Damien had planted earlier bloomed into full flower. Lila's mind raced through everything she'd observed. The dossiers Victor had sent her, the behavior during the meeting, Thomas Crane's nervousness, Jennifer Zhao's careful neutrality, David Santos's constant glances toward the exit. "It's not just him," Lila heard herself say. All attention swiveled to her, and she suddenly regretted speaking, but Damien nodded slightly, encouraging her to continue. There has to be someone else. Richard said you were supposed to be dead already. He's talking about last night. But he didn't pull that trigger himself. Someone helped him set it up. The girl's right, Diane said, her gun still pressed to Richard's head. The sniper last night required inside information, specific details about your schedule, your security rotation, the exact booth you'd be sitting in. Richard had access to some of that, but not all of it. Marcus, Damien said, his eyes never leaving Richard's face. Check their phones, all of them. Every person in this room. I want call logs, messages, everything. You can't be serious, Patricia Coleman protested. We're not criminals. You're employees in a criminal organization, Damien cut her off. And right now, I don't trust any of you. So you'll submit to the search, or you'll leave this building in a body bag. Your choice. The room fell silent. One by one, people reached for their phones and handed them over. Marcus and Leonard began collecting them, their faces impassive. Lila watched David Santos during this process. He'd gone very still, his hand hesitating over his pocket. His eyes darted to the door again, then to Richard, then back to his phone. Mr. Santos seems reluctant, Lila said quietly, trusting her instincts the way Damien had told her to. David's head snapped up, his face flushing. I'm not reluctant. I have private information on my phone, personal contacts. Then you have nothing to hide, Damien said. Hand it over. For a long moment, David didn't move. Lila could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Fight or flight. Confess or deny. Trust that whatever was on his phone wouldn't be found, or accept that the game was already over. He chose flight. David lunged for the door with surprising speed for a man his size. But he'd telegraphed his move with that last glance, and Lila had been watching. She stepped into his path, not to stop him. She wasn't foolish enough to think she could physically restrain him, but to slow him down just enough. David crashed into her, sending them both stumbling. Lila hit the floor hard, pain exploding through her shoulder, but she'd accomplished her goal. Leonard was there instantly, his massive frame blocking the exit. David spun, reaching for a weapon, but Marcus had already closed in from behind. They had him down and restrained in seconds. Damien walked over slowly, looking down at David with an expression that could have been carved from ice. Run the phone, he said to Diane. I want to know everything. Diane pulled a device from her jacket, something Lila didn't recognize, and connected David's phone to it. Numbers and text began scrolling across a screen, faster than Lila could read. Encrypted messages, Diane said after a moment. Deleted but recoverable. Multiple communications with Richard over the past 6 months. And her face hardened. Communication with an external number 30 minutes before the shooting last night, confirming Damien's location at the Velvet Cage. The pieces clicked into place with awful clarity. Richard had planned the assassination, but David had provided the real-time intelligence. The specific location, the exact timing, the security details that made the shot possible. You sold me out for what? Damien asked David, his voice dangerously soft. Money? A bigger cut of operations? A promise from Richard that you'd move up when I was dead? David said nothing, his jaw clenched tight. It was all of it, Richard said, and he was smiling now despite the blood on his face and the gun at his head. I promised him your position, head of security once you were gone. Diane's job, all the power that comes with it. Same deal I offered to others. A new regime, better terms, more opportunity. You're too much like your father, Damien. Too controlling, too paranoid. People are tired of it. Others? Damien repeated. Who else did you recruit? Richard's smile widened. You'll never know. Not all of them. Some are in this room right now, and they're not going to confess just because David got caught. They'll wait. They'll watch. And when the next opportunity comes, they'll take it. The psychological warfare was masterful. Lila could see it working on the people around the table. Suddenly, everyone was looking at everyone else with suspicion. Who else had Richard turned? Who else was waiting for their chance? Damien's expression didn't change, but Lila sensed something shifting in him. A decision being made. You're right about one thing, Damien said to Richard. I am like my father. He built this organization on fear and control. And you know what? It worked. For 30 years, it worked. People stayed in line because they knew the cost of betrayal. He paused. But my father had one weakness. He was sentimental. He kept people around because of history, because of loyalty they'd shown decades ago. He didn't see when that loyalty had rotted away. And you're different? Richard challenged. I'm learning to be. Damien turned to address the room. Here's what's going to happen. Richard and David are going to tell me everything. Every person they approached, every promise they made, every plan they had. And then they're going to disappear. Not killed, that would make them martyrs. Just gone, erased, as if they never existed. Their accounts emptied, their property seized, their names forgotten. You think that will stop the others? Richard asked. The ones I turned? They're already in motion. You can't stop what's coming. Maybe not, Damien conceded, but I have something you didn't count on. Something that's already proven more valuable than your entire conspiracy. His eyes found Lila, and she felt the weight of every gaze in the room follow. Her? Richard's laugh was genuine this time. A waitress, that's your secret weapon. A waitress who saw your sniper before my trained security team did, Damien said. Who threw a decanter at your head with perfect timing. Who identified David's guilt before he ran. She's been here less than 24 hours and she's already dismantled your entire operation. Lila felt her face flush. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. Being invisible, watching from the background, that was one thing. Being held up as some kind of hero in front of people who clearly resented her existence was something else entirely. Jennifer Zhao spoke for the first time since the chaos had erupted. With all due respect, boss, she got lucky. Twice. That doesn't make her qualified to root out conspiracies. Luck is what people call pattern recognition they don't understand, Diane said sharply. The girl has instincts. Good ones. Better than some people who've been doing this for years. She's a liability, Thomas Crane said, finally finding his voice. She knows nothing about our operations, our protocols. She could compromise everything. Damien held up a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Here's what I know. Lila Hayes has saved my life twice in 2 days. She's identified 2 traitors that the rest of you missed, and she's done it without agenda, without asking for anything beyond basic security and fair payment. That's more than I can say for some of you. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. So here's what's going to happen next, Damien continued. Diane, take Richard and David to the holding facility. I want every detail extracted. Use whatever methods necessary. Marcus, Leonard, sweep this entire building. I want to know if there are any more surprises waiting for us. And the rest of us? Patricia Coleman asked nervously. The rest of you are going to go back to your operations and prove your loyalty. Not through words, through actions. I want perfect execution, perfect results, perfect transparency. Any irregularities, any unexplained activities, any hint that you're working against this organization, and you'll join Richard and David. It was a purge in all but name. Lila could see the fear rippling through the room, the sudden understanding that everything had changed. The old order was dead. Damien was rebuilding from scratch, and only the most useful, most loyal, most frightened would survive. Meeting adjourned, Damien said. Get out. They fled like rabbits, gathering their phones hastily and hurrying toward the exit. Only Diane, Marcus, and Leonard remained, efficiently securing Richard and David. The 2 traitors were being zip-tied and searched, their expensive suits disheveled, their faces showing the reality of their situation sinking in. Lila stood frozen near the overturned conference table, her shoulder throbbing where she'd hit the floor, her mind trying to process everything that had just happened. She'd thrown a crystal decanter at a man's head. She'd called out traitors in front of a room full of criminals. She'd just upended her entire understanding of what she was capable of. Damien appeared beside her so quietly she hadn't heard him approach. You're hurt. I'm fine. You're not. Let Diane look at your shoulder once she's finished with them. Lila finally looked at him, really looked at him. His face was still that carefully controlled mask, but his eyes were different, warmer somehow, almost concerned. Did you know it was Richard? She asked. Before tonight? I suspected. He'd been too perfect lately, too supportive, too agreeable. Richard's natural state is argumentative. When someone changes their fundamental behavior, they're either sick, in love, or planning something. He paused. I didn't want to believe it. That's the sentiment my father had that I criticized. I let history cloud my judgment. But you used tonight to flush him out. A small smile touched his lips. The meeting was bait. I wanted to see who'd panic under pressure, who'd make a move. I didn't expect it to be this dramatic, but yes, I was testing everyone in that room, including me, especially you. I needed to know if your instincts were real or if last night was a fluke. His smile widened fractionally. Congratulations. You passed. By throwing barware at people? By seeing what needed to be done and doing it without hesitation. That's rare, Lila. Rarer than you know. Diane approached, having left Richard and David in Marcus and Leonard's capable hands. We need to move them soon, and we need to secure this location. If Richard had people in our security detail, there might be others. Agreed, Damien said. Lila, go with Diane. Get that shoulder checked. Then I want you somewhere safe until we've cleared out the remaining threats. What about you? Lila asked before she could stop herself. I'll be fine. This isn't my first purge. The casual way he said it sent a chill down her spine. How many times had Damien cleaned house like this? How many betrayals had he survived? How much blood had been spilled in the name of maintaining control? Diane led her out of the conference room and down a corridor to what looked like a medical facility. Nothing fancy, but well stocked. A man in his 50s was already there, clearly a doctor, though Lila doubted he had a legitimate practice. Shoulder, Diane ordered, and the doctor began his examination. While he worked, gentle despite his rough appearance, Diane stood by the window, her posture tense. You did good tonight, she said without turning around. Really good. But you need to understand something. What's that? You're a target now. Richard's conspiracy might be broken, but his words were true. There are others out there who want Damien dead. And now they know you're the one who helped stop tonight's attempt. They'll see you as a threat. I'm nobody, Lila protested. You're not nobody anymore, Diane cut her off. You're the person Damien Voss publicly credited with saving his life and dismantling a major conspiracy. You're someone he's clearly placing a lot of trust in. That makes you valuable. And in our world, valuable means dangerous. The doctor finished wrapping her shoulder, just bruised, not broken, and stepped back. Lila flexed her arm experimentally, wincing at the soreness. So what do I do? She asked Diane. You learn, fast. I'm going to teach you how to spot surveillance, how to handle yourself in a fight, how to think 3 steps ahead of anyone who might come after you. Because they will come. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but eventually someone will decide you're either an asset to acquire or a threat to eliminate. That's comforting, Lila said dryly. It's realistic, and realistic is what keeps you breathing. Diane finally turned from the window, her expression serious. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen people come and go, rise and fall, live and die. The ones who survive are the ones who accept the reality of this life and adapt to it. The ones who keep thinking they're going to return to normal eventually, they end up in holes in the desert. Lila thought about her apartment, her old life, the person she'd been just 48 hours ago. That Lila Hayes felt like a stranger now, someone young and naive who didn't understand how the world really worked. Can I ask you something? Lila said. Diane nodded. Do you ever regret it, getting into this life? For a long moment, Diane didn't answer. When she did, her voice was quieter than Lila had heard it before. Every day. And never. I was FBI, straight-laced, by the book. Then I learned the book was written by people who'd never faced real monsters. When I crossed the line, I told myself it was just once. Just this one case where the ends justified the means. But there's no such thing as just once. You either walk away completely or you keep walking until you're so far in the dark you can't see the light anymore. That's not encouraging. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true. Diane's expression softened slightly. But I'll say this. If you have to be in this world, working for Damien is better than most alternatives. He's brutal when he needs to be, but he's also fair. He rewards loyalty and competence. And unlike a lot of people in this business, he actually has a code. Twisted maybe, but it exists. What code is that? He doesn't hurt civilians unless they're actively working against him. He doesn't tolerate drugs being sold near schools. He pays his people well and on time, and he keeps his word. Diane paused. Richard forgot that last part. Damien promised him a comfortable retirement after 30 years of service. He would have honored that if Richard had just waited. But greed and impatience made Richard try to take everything at once. Lila absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man who'd calmly ordered the interrogation of traitors with someone who had ethical boundaries. Her encrypted phone buzzed. A message from Damien. "Status?" She typed back, "Shoulders fine. Diane's scaring me with reality checks." His response came quickly. "Good. She's excellent at that. Stay with her until I give the all clear. And Lila, thank you. For tonight. For seeing what others missed." Lila stared at the message, warmth blooming unexpectedly in her chest. When was the last time someone had thanked her for anything? When was the last time someone had valued what she could do? "Just doing what you hired me for," she typed back. "No, you went beyond that. We'll talk tomorrow. Get some rest." The messages deleted themselves after 30 seconds, vanishing like they'd never existed. But the feeling lingered. Diane's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. We're moving now." "What's happening?" Lila asked. "Damien wants you at a safe house until we finish sweeping the organization. There's an apartment in the financial district, high security, everything you need. You'll stay there for the next few days while we root out anyone else Richard might have turned." "I can't just disappear. I have—" Lila stopped. What did she have? A job she'd already compromised, an apartment that was paid for months in advance, no family, no close friends, nothing tying her to her old life except habit. "You don't have anything that can't wait," Diane finished for her. "Come on, the car's waiting." They took a service elevator down to an underground garage where a nondescript sedan was idling. The driver was someone Lila hadn't met yet, a woman in her 30s with alert eyes and capable hands. "This is Sarah," Diane said. "She'll be your primary protection detail for the next few days. Former Secret Service, completely vetted. You can trust her." Sarah nodded politely but didn't speak. She just opened the rear door and waited. Lila climbed in, her body finally starting to register the adrenaline crash from the evening's events. Every muscle ached, her shoulder throbbed, her mind felt like it had been running at full speed for hours and was finally hitting empty. The drive through the city was quiet. Sarah took a circuitous route, clearly checking for tails. Diane sat in the passenger seat, her phone constantly buzzing with updates. "Marcus confirms Richard's people in security are being rounded up," Diane said at one point. 5 more arrests so far. We're bleeding the conspiracy dry." "How many do you think there are total?" Lila asked. "Hard to say. Richard was smart. He compartmentalized his recruitment. Most of the people he turned probably don't know about each other. Makes it harder for us to find them all, but also means they can't coordinate a unified response now that he's captured." They pulled into an underground parking structure attached to a gleaming high-rise. Sarah used a key card to access a private elevator that rose swiftly to the 28th floor. The apartment was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. It was the kind of place Lila had only seen in magazines, completely divorced from the reality of her normal life. "Bedroom's through there," Diane said, pointing. "Bathroom's stocked. Kitchen has food. Don't go near the windows, they're bulletproof, but still avoid them. Sarah will be posted outside. You need anything, you call her or me. Questions?" Lila shook her head, too overwhelmed to formulate coherent queries. "Get some sleep," Diane said, her voice gentler. "You've earned it. And Lila? Welcome to the inner circle. Very few people ever make it this far this fast. Try not to get yourself killed now that you're here." Then she was gone, leaving Lila alone in a luxury apartment that felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. She walked slowly to the windows, careful not to get too close, and looked out at the city spread below. Somewhere out there, Richard and David were being interrogated. Somewhere, Damien was consolidating his power and hunting remaining traitors. Somewhere, people were making decisions that would ripple through criminal empires and ordinary lives alike. And somehow, impossibly, Lila was now part of that world. She touched her shoulder where the doctor had wrapped it, feeling the ache beneath the bandages. Real pain from a real fight. She'd been hurt before. Life had dealt out plenty of bruises, but never like this. Never from throwing herself into danger rather than away from it. Her encrypted phone buzzed one more time. Another message from Damien. "Sleep well. Tomorrow, we rebuild. Lila typed back, "What if there are more traitors tomorrow?" His response was immediate. "Then we'll find them too, together." The word hung there on her screen before the message deleted itself. Together. Like she was actually part of this, not just a temporary asset or a convenient tool. Like she mattered. Lila made her way to the bedroom and collapsed onto a bed that was far too comfortable for someone who usually slept on a 20-year-old mattress in a studio apartment. She should have been terrified, should have been planning her escape, counting the money she'd need to disappear completely. Instead, she fell asleep thinking about pattern recognition and crystal decanters and the look in Damien Voss's eyes when he'd thanked her. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself or fail spectacularly. But for tonight, she'd survived. She'd seen the truth when others missed it. She'd acted when hesitation would have cost lives. And in a world where hesitation meant death, that made all the difference. The morning light hit Lila's face through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft, the room too large, the silence too complete. Then memory crashed back. Richard's betrayal, David's flight, the crystal decanter connecting with flesh and bone, Damien's dark eyes watching her with something that might have been respect. Her encrypted phone showed 3 messages, all from Damien, all time-stamped within the last hour. Richard talked. Names, dates, transactions. The conspiracy was bigger than we thought. Meeting at noon, my personal office. Diane will bring you. Wear something professional. Today you stop being invisible. Lila read the last message twice, her stomach nodding. Stop being invisible. That had been her survival strategy for 23 years. Blend in, stay quiet, don't attract attention. Now Damien was asking her to do the exact opposite. She found clothes in the apartment's closet, clearly purchased for her, in her exact size, which should have been creepy but somehow just felt efficient. A charcoal pantsuit that fit perfectly, a cream blouse, shoes that were comfortable and expensive. Someone had studied her measurements and style with the same precision they'd probably used to plan an assassination. Sarah was waiting in the hallway when Lila emerged at 11:30, looking exactly as alert as she had the night before. Either she didn't sleep or she was incredibly good at hiding exhaustion. "Morning," Sarah said, her first actual words to Lila. Her voice was crisp, professional. "Diane's downstairs. Building's been swept twice overnight. We're clear." They took the private elevator down to where Diane waited beside a different car than last night. A sleek black Mercedes with windows tinted almost to opacity. Diane looked Lila up and down, nodding approval. "Good. You clean up well." She opened the rear door. "Get in. We have a lot to cover before the meeting." Once they were moving through downtown traffic, Diane pulled out a tablet and brought up what looked like an organizational chart. Names, photos, connecting lines showing relationships and hierarchies. Lila recognized some faces from last night's meeting. Richard's interrogation confirmed 12 people directly recruited to his conspiracy, Diane said without preamble. 5 in security, 3 in logistics, 2 in financial operations, and 2 in political connections. We've arrested 9 so far. The other 3 scattered when word got out about Richard's capture. "And the ones you arrested?" Lila asked. "What happens to them?" "That depends on how cooperative they are and how deep their betrayal runs. Some might be salvageable with the right incentives. Others," Diane's expression hardened. "Damien doesn't forgive attacks on his life. You saw what happened to the sniper." Lila remembered. Dead before they could question him. A loose end tied off with brutal efficiency. "But here's the interesting part," Diane continued, zooming in on the chart. "Richard claimed he was working alone, that these 12 were his only recruits. But the financial forensics tell a different story. Money's been moving through accounts that Richard couldn't have accessed. Shipments have been rerouted through channels he had no authority over. Someone else is playing this game." "Another traitor? Or Richard's partner? Someone he's protecting even now?" Diane glanced at Lila. "That's where you come in. Damien wants you at this meeting not as a waitress but as an observer. He's gathering the remaining department heads, everyone who wasn't directly implicated in Richard's conspiracy. And he wants you to watch them the way you watched last night. He's using me as a lie detector. More like a truth detector. You see patterns, remember? Behavioral tells that most people miss. If someone in that room is Richard's partner, they'll give something away. A reaction, a hesitation, something. Lila's mouth went dry. And if I'm wrong? If I accuse someone who's actually innocent? Then Damien will verify before acting. He's not going to execute people based solely on your instinct, but your instinct will tell him where to look, who to investigate more closely. Diane paused. This is what you signed up for, Lila. This is the job. The car pulled up to a building Lila hadn't seen before, older than Damien's other properties, built in an era when architecture meant something beyond glass and steel. Stone facade, arched windows, the kind of gravitas that came from surviving decades of urban change. The entrance was guarded by two men who looked like they could stop a small tank. Inside, the aesthetic continued. Hardwood everything, leather furniture, oil paintings that were probably worth more than Lila would earn in her lifetime. This wasn't a front or a facade. This was Damien's actual headquarters, the heart of his empire. Diane led her through corridors where everyone they passed stopped and stared. Word had clearly spread about who Lila was, what she'd done. Some faces showed curiosity, others resentment, a few something that might have been fear. The waitress who'd saved the boss's life and exposed a conspiracy was now an unknown quantity, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous. They reached a heavy oak door. Diane knocked twice and entered without waiting for a response. The office beyond was exactly what Lila expected, and nothing like it simultaneously. Large, yes, with that same wall of windows overlooking the city. But it wasn't ostentatious. The desk was functional, covered with actual work. Files, laptops, phones. The bookshelves held volumes that looked read rather than decorative. This was a space where real decisions got made, not where someone played at being powerful. Damien stood by the windows, his back to them, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger, wait, and continued his conversation. I don't care what the union rep says, Michael. The port workers know what happened to the last group that tried to leverage against me. Tell them they get a 4% raise, not the 8% they're demanding, and if they don't like it, we'll find workers who will. He listened for a moment. Good. Handle it. He ended the call and turned, and Lila was struck again by how he occupied space. He wore another suit, navy this time, with a white shirt open at the collar, no tie. Somehow the casual element made him more dangerous, not less. Lila, thank you for coming. His eyes swept over her, noting the professional attire. You look ready. Diane said you wanted me to watch your people. See if any of them are lying. Not lying, necessarily, but hiding something, yes. He gestured to a seating area, leather couch and chairs arranged around a low table. Sit. We have 20 minutes before they arrive. Diane excused herself, leaving Lila alone with Damien for the first time since the coffee shop. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with everything unsaid. How's your shoulder? Damien asked, settling into one of the chairs. Sore but functional. Lila sat on the couch, maintaining what felt like a safe distance. Diane says Richard's interrogation revealed more conspirators than you expected. 12 confirmed, possibly more we haven't found yet. Richard was more ambitious than I gave him credit for. Something dark flickered across Damien's face. My father used to say that the best traitors are the ones who've been loyal the longest. They know all your patterns, all your weaknesses. They know exactly where to strike. You blame yourself for not seeing it sooner. It wasn't a question, and Damien's slight smile acknowledged that. I do. I should have moved on him months ago when the financial irregularities first appeared, but I wanted proof, wanted to be certain. That hesitation almost cost me everything. But it didn't. You're still here. Because a waitress I'd never met saw a reflection in a mirror and decided to act. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. Do you understand how rare that is? How most people, even trained professionals, would have frozen or run or convinced themselves they were seeing things. You moved. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just action. Lila felt heat creep up her neck. I didn't think about it. If I had, I probably wouldn't have done it. Exactly. That's instinct. That's what I need. He paused. The people coming to this meeting are the ones who run my organization day to day. Logistics, operations, financial management, political connections. After last night's purge, they're all nervous. They know positions just opened up, that there's opportunity for advancement if they prove themselves loyal. They also know that any misstep could make them the next Richard. So they'll be on their best behavior, which is when people reveal the most. When they're trying too hard to appear normal, they often overcorrect. Watch for that. Watch for anyone who seems too rehearsed, too eager to please, too quick to condemn Richard and David. A knock at the door interrupted them. Diane returned, followed by Victor and 3 others Lila recognized from her briefing materials. They filed in silently, arranging themselves around the office with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. Over the next 10 minutes, more arrived. Lila counted 15 total, men and women of various ages, all dressed in business attire, all carrying the same tension in their shoulders. They knew this meeting was important, they just didn't know exactly how important. When the last person arrived, Damien stood and everyone fell silent immediately. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he began, his voice carrying that quiet authority that made people lean in. "By now you've all heard about Richard and David, about the conspiracy they led against this organization, against me personally." Heads nodded. A few people murmured agreement. What you might not know is the full scope of their betrayal. 12 people total recruited to actively work against us. $5 million embezzled over 3 years. 3 major shipments redirected to competitors. And an assassination attempt that came within inches of succeeding. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Lila watched faces, noting reactions. Most showed appropriate shock and anger. A few looked genuinely sick at the scale of the betrayal. But one woman, Helen Graves, according to Lila's mental notes, head of political operations, looked almost satisfied. No, not satisfied. Vindicated. Like she'd suspected something all along and was pleased to be proven right. "I'm telling you this because transparency is important," Damien continued. "You need to understand what we're dealing with. But more importantly, you need to understand what happens next. This organization is being rebuilt from the ground up. New protocols, new oversight, new consequences for anyone who thinks they can operate outside my authority." He let that sink in before continuing. "There will be opportunities for those who prove themselves. Richard's position needs filling, so does David's. Several others' positions are now vacant. But make no mistake, I'm not just looking for competence anymore. I'm looking for absolute loyalty. For people who understand that betrayal isn't just bad for business, it's fatal." The threat hung in the air, unsubtle and effective. "Now," Damien said, his tone shifting slightly, becoming almost conversational, "I want each of you to tell me about your departments, what's working, what's not, what you need from me to do your jobs better. We'll go around the room. Michael, you first." Michael Chen, no relation to Diane, Lila had learned, ran shipping logistics. He launched into a detailed report about container movements, customs relationships, port efficiency. He spoke quickly, precisely, like someone who'd prepared extensively and didn't want to waste anyone's time. Lila watched not Michael, but the others. Who was paying attention? Who was distracted? Who seemed nervous about what might be said? Helen Graves kept glancing at her phone, subtle but frequent, checking messages, or checking to see if someone was responding to messages she'd sent. Thomas Crane from last night's meeting was there too, still nervous, but his nervousness seemed more general now. Less like guilt and more like someone who'd genuinely been shaken by recent events. Person after person gave their reports. Port operations, political connections, financial management, real estate acquisitions. The scope of Damien's empire became clear through these presentations. This wasn't just organized crime in the traditional sense. This was a multi-billion-dollar operation that touched everything from city council votes to international shipping to property development. When it came to Helen Graves's turn, she set her phone face down on the table and launched into her report with practiced ease. Political contributions, key relationships with city officials, upcoming elections that might impact operations. She was good, Lila had to admit. Confident without being arrogant, detailed without being boring. But something was off. Lila couldn't pinpoint it immediately. It wasn't Helen's words or even her body language in isolation. It was the pattern. Everyone else had referenced Richard at least once in their reports, how his arrest had affected their department, what challenges it created, how they were adapting. Helen hadn't mentioned him once. She spoke as if the conspiracy had never happened, as if they were just having a routine department update. That absence was its own kind of tell. Lila caught Damien's eye briefly, then glanced meaningfully at Helen. He gave the tiniest nod, acknowledging her signal. When Helen finished her report, Damien asked casually, "And how has Richard's arrest affected your political relationships? I imagine some of our city council connections are nervous about continued association." Helen didn't miss a beat. "Some initial concern, yes, but I've been managing it, reassuring people that Richard was an isolated incident, that our operations remain stable. Most of our political friends understand that loyalty to this organization is financially rewarding." "I'm sure it is," Damien said. "Did Richard ever approach you about his plans, try to recruit you to his conspiracy?" The question landed like a bomb. Everyone in the room went still. Helen's composure cracked for just a fraction of a second, a flash of something in her eyes that might have been panic before she smoothed it away. "No, never. If he had, I would have reported it immediately." "Of course you would have," Damien said smoothly. "Just curious. He approached a lot of people, apparently. Victor, did Richard mention Helen during his interrogation?" Victor, standing by the door, checked his tablet. "No specific mention, sir, though the interrogation is still ongoing." Lila watched Helen's hands. They'd been resting calmly on the table. Now they were clasped together, knuckles slightly white. Tension she was trying to hide. "Helen," Damien said, his voice deceptively gentle, "can I see your phone for a moment?" The room's atmosphere shifted instantly from tense to electric. "My phone?" Helen's smile was strained. "Why would you need—" "Because I'm asking. And because right now, everyone in this organization is subject to verification. You just said you'd report anyone who approached you about conspiracy. I'm simply verifying that claim." Helen's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. I've been loyal to this organization for 8 years. I've delivered election after election, relationship after relationship, and now you're treating me like a criminal because some waitress gave you a look?" The mask was slipping. Lila could see it happening in real time, the professional facade cracking under pressure, revealing something uglier underneath. "The waitress has a name," Damien said, his voice cooling several degrees. "And she's proven more valuable in 3 days than some people have in 8 years. Now give me your phone, Helen, or walk out of this building and never come back." "Your choice." Helen's jaw clenched. For a long moment she didn't move. Then, with jerky motions, she picked up her phone and handed it across the table. Damien passed it to Victor without looking at it. "Run it. Full forensics. I want to know everyone she's been in contact with for the last 6 months." "You can't do this," Helen said, her voice rising. "I have rights. You have exactly what I give you." Damien cut her off. "This isn't a democracy, Helen. This isn't a corporation with HR departments and employee protections. This is my organization, and you work for me. When I say jump, you don't ask why. You ask how high." The brutal honesty of it silenced whatever Helen had been about to say. She sat back in her chair, her face pale, watching Victor work on her phone. The rest of the room had gone absolutely quiet. Everyone was watching this confrontation unfold, understanding that how Helen handled the next few minutes would determine whether she walked out free or in custody. Victor's expression darkened as he scrolled through data. "Sir, encrypted messages, same app Richard and David were using." "Recent?" Damien asked. "Last message was sent 15 minutes before this meeting, to an unknown number." Victor's voice was flat, professional, but Lila could hear the anger underneath. Message reads, "Meeting starting, will update after." Helen had gone from pale to ashen. "Who were you reporting to?" Damien asked, and now there was no gentleness in his voice at all, just cold, hard authority. "Who's on the other end of those messages?" "I don't know what you're talking about. That could be anyone, a friend." "Don't lie to me." Damien stood, and the movement made everyone tense. "You were updating someone about this meeting, someone who wanted to know what happened here. Who was it?" Helen's hands were shaking now. She looked around the room as if searching for allies and finding none. Everyone had pulled back from her, distancing themselves from the contamination of betrayal. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," Helen said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Richard just wanted information. Political contacts, who we could leverage, who might turn against you. Just information. I didn't know about the assassination attempt. I swear I didn't know. But you knew you were betraying me, Damien said. You knew you were selling information to someone working against this organization. He said things were changing, that you were getting too aggressive, making too many enemies, that it was only a matter of time before you went down. And when you did, everyone loyal to you would go down too. He offered me protection, a place in whatever came next. So it was about fear, Damien said. You thought I was going to fail and you wanted to be on the winning side. Can you blame me? Helen's voice cracked. Look at what you do to people who cross you. Look at Richard, at David. I've seen what happens in your interrogation rooms, Damien. I've seen the bodies that wash up in the river. I didn't want to be one of them. Then you should have stayed loyal. Loyalty is the only real protection in this world. Damien turned to Victor. Take her to the same facility as Richard and David. I want to know who she was reporting to and what information she's already given them. No! Helen surged to her feet, but Victor was already there, his massive hand clamping on her shoulder and forcing her back down. Please, I'll tell you everything. I'll cooperate. Just don't. You'll cooperate either way, Damien said. The question is whether you do it the easy way or the hard way. That's your only remaining choice. 2 more security personnel appeared from somewhere, flanking Helen's chair. She looked between them with wild eyes, finally understanding that there was no talking her way out of this. As they escorted her from the office, her dignity crumbled completely. She was crying, pleading, promising anything if they'd just let her go. The door closed on her desperate pleas, cutting them off like a switch. The remaining people in the room sat frozen, staring at the space where Helen had been. Damien returned to his position by the windows, his back to the room for a moment. When he turned around again, his expression was controlled, but Lila could see the fury simmering beneath the surface. Let Helen be a lesson, he said quietly. I don't punish mistakes. I punish betrayal. If you're in over your head, if you're struggling with your responsibilities, if you need help, come to me. I'm reasonable about operational challenges. What I'm not reasonable about is deceit. Sir, a woman named Patricia who handled real estate spoke up nervously. How did you know about Helen? Was it really just the phone checking? Damien's eyes found Lila. It was observation, paying attention to patterns that most people miss. Helen made a critical error. She tried too hard to act normal. Everyone else in this room mentioned Richard's arrest and how it affected their operations. Helen pretended it hadn't happened at all. That absence was more telling than any presence could have been. All eyes turned to Lila. She felt the weight of their assessment, their recalculation of who she was and what she represented. This is Lila Hayes, Damien continued. Some of you met her last night. The rest of you have heard about her by now. She saved my life twice and identified 3 conspirators in as many days. Going forward, she'll be working directly with me on internal security and operational oversight. You'll treat her with the same respect you'd show Diane or Victor. Any questions? No one spoke. They wouldn't dare. Good. This meeting is adjourned. Get back to your departments, and remember, I reward loyalty and competence. Demonstrate both, and you'll prosper. Demonstrate neither. He let the sentence hang. They filed out quickly, most avoiding eye contact with either Damien or Lila. Within minutes, the office was empty except for Damien, Diane, Victor, and Lila herself. 3 for 3, Diane said, a note of impressed approval in her voice. You're batting 1,000. Helen was scared, Lila said quietly. She really didn't know about the assassination. She thought she was just hedging her bets, staying connected to both sides in case things went bad. That's what makes her dangerous, Damien said. People who betray out of malice I can understand. People who betray out of fear or greed or ambition, they'll do it again the second they feel threatened. Helen had to go regardless of her intentions. Lila thought about Helen's face as security led her away, the terror in her eyes. 3 days ago, that could have been her, caught up in something beyond her understanding, making desperate choices that only made things worse. You're thinking too much, Damien observed. I can see it in your face. I'm thinking about how thin the line is, between being useful and being a liability, between being protected and being a target. The line isn't thin at all, Damien said. It's very clearly marked. As long as you're honest with me, as long as you use your skills in service of this organization rather than against it, you're protected. The moment you cross that line, the moment you become what Helen became, everything changes. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be clear. I don't deal in comforting lies, Lila. I deal in uncomfortable truths. The truth is, you're safer now than you've ever been in your life because you're valuable to me and you're honest. Those two qualities together are rare and precious. Victor's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked at Damien. Richard's asking to speak with you. Says he has more information, but he'll only give it directly to you. Of course he does. Damien's jaw tightened. He's trying to leverage whatever knowledge he has left into better treatment. Did he say what the information is? Just that it's about someone high up in the organization, someone we haven't suspected yet. The implications hung heavy in the air. 3 conspirators caught, but Richard claimed there was someone else, someone even closer to Damien than the others had been. I'll go talk to him, Damien said. Diane, Victor, come with me. Lila, I'm coming too, she said before he could finish. Damien raised an eyebrow. This isn't going to be pleasant. Richard's interrogation has been thorough. What you'll see, I know what I'll see. People in pain, people being broken down to get information. I'm not naive enough to think this is all boardrooms and business meetings. Lila met his gaze steadily. If I'm really part of this organization, if you really want me working internal security, then I need to see all of it, not just the parts you think I can handle. For a long moment, Damien studied her face. Then he nodded slowly. All right, but understand, once you see what happens in those rooms, you can't unsee it. The illusion that this is just business, just strategy and analysis dies. You'll know exactly what kind of organization you're part of. I already know, Lila said. I've known since the moment I saw a man executed to cover up a conspiracy. I'm not looking for illusions. I'm looking for truth. Damien's expression shifted into something Lila couldn't quite read. Respect? Recognition? Whatever it was, it felt like a door opening between them. Then let's go find some truth. They took an elevator down, way down, below the parking levels, into a basement that Lila hadn't known existed. The walls here were concrete, the lighting harsh and industrial. This was the foundation of Damien's empire, literally and figuratively. The place where difficult problems got resolved and uncomfortable questions got answered. The interrogation facility was exactly what Lila expected, and somehow worse. Soundproofed rooms with reinforced doors. Medical equipment that it could sustain life or cause pain depending on how it was used. The smell of disinfectant trying and failing to cover something more primal. Richard was in the 3rd room, strapped to a chair that bolted to the floor. He looked nothing like the distinguished advisor from 2 nights ago. His silver hair was matted with sweat, his expensive suit replaced by a gray jumpsuit, his face bearing the marks of professional interrogation, bruises in places designed for maximum pain but minimum permanent damage. When he saw Damien enter, something flickered in his eyes. Hate, yes, but also a desperate kind of hope. Damien, Richard's voice was hoarse. Finally, I was beginning to think you'd just leave me down here to rot. The thought crossed my mind, Damien said, pulling up a chair and sitting just out of Richard's reach. But Victor tells me you have more information, something important enough that you'll only tell me directly. Richard laughed, a wet, painful sound. Still so arrogant, still thinking you're 3 steps ahead of everyone. That's what's going to kill you eventually. Maybe, but not today. So talk. Who else is working against me? Richard's eyes slid past Damien to Lila, standing in the doorway. The girl again, your new favorite pet. She's smarter than she looks, I'll give her that. Smarter than most of your so-called security professionals. Don't change the subject, Damien said coldly. You claimed you have information. Give it to me or I walk out and you get another session with the people who've been asking you questions the hard way. Fear flashed across Richard's face. Whatever had happened during his interrogation had genuinely broken something in him. There's someone else, Richard said finally. Someone who helped plan everything from the beginning. Someone so close to you that you've never suspected them, never even considered the possibility. Damien went very still. Who? First, I want guarantees, prison instead of whatever hole you're planning to dump me in. Medical care, protection from anyone who might want revenge for the conspiracy failing. You're not in a position to negotiate. I'm in the only position that matters. I have information you need and no one else can give you. Not Helen, Not David, not any of the others. Just me. So you'll give me what I want, or you'll spend the rest of your life wondering who's still working against you. Lila watched this exchange, her mind racing through possibilities. Who was close enough to Damien to be above suspicion? Who had the access and knowledge to help Richard plan an assassination? Diane. Victor. Marcus. Leonard. Even Lila herself, though that was absurd since she'd only been involved for 3 days. Give me the name first, Damien said. Then we'll talk about arrangements. Give me the guarantee first, signed, witnessed, legally binding. Damien stood abruptly. You've got 30 minutes to decide if you want a deal or not. After that, I stop caring what you know because I'll find it out another way. He walked out, and Lila followed, leaving Richard shouting after them. In the hallway outside, Damien leaned against the wall and closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were burning with controlled fury. He's lying, Diane said firmly, trying to buy himself better treatment by dangling a conspiracy that doesn't exist. Maybe, Damien said. Or maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe there is someone else, someone I trust completely, who's been working against me all along. If there is, we'll find them, Victor said. We've been running financial forensics, communication analysis, everything. If someone's dirty, they've left traces. Unless they're good enough not to leave traces. Damien looked at Lila. What do you think? You've been reading people all week. Is Richard bluffing, or does he really know something? Lila thought back to Richard's face in that interrogation room. The fear was real. She'd stake her life on that. But the information? That was harder to judge. He believes what he's saying, she said finally. Whether it's true or not, he genuinely thinks there's someone else. But he could be wrong. He could be paranoid, seeing conspiracies where there are none. Or someone could have planted that idea in his head deliberately to cause exactly this kind of chaos. Damien nodded slowly. Paranoia is a useful tool when used correctly. Turn my own people against each other. Make me doubt everyone around me. Classic strategy. He pushed off from the wall. We give him his guarantee. Prison, medical care, protection. And if his information checks out, he serves his sentence in relative comfort. If he's lying, the deal is void and he goes in a hole. I'll draft the paperwork, Diane said, already pulling out her phone. 20 minutes later, they were back in the interrogation room. Richard read through the document Diane had prepared, his hands shaking slightly. Then he signed it, witnessed by all 4 of them. Now talk, Damien commanded. Richard looked up, and there was something almost like satisfaction in his battered face. It's someone you've known for years. Someone who's been with your family since before you took over. Someone who's saved your life multiple times and has your complete unwavering trust. Lila's blood ran cold as Richard's eyes locked onto a specific point across the room. It's Marcus, Richard said. Marcus Webb is the mastermind behind everything, and he's been planning your death since the day your father died. The silence that followed Richard's accusation was absolute. Not the silence of surprise, Lila realized, but the silence of people holding their breath, waiting to see who would break first. Marcus Webb stood against the far wall of the interrogation room, his weathered face completely impassive. He'd been there the entire time, silent and still, and now every eye in the room was on him. Marcus, Damien said slowly, his voice carefully neutral. Care to respond to that? Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch, just met Damien's gaze with the steady calm of someone who'd faced down death more times than he could count. Richard's desperate. He'll say anything to save himself. This is a play, and you know it. Is it? Richard laughed, that same bitter sound. Tell him about the offshore accounts, Marcus. The ones in the Cayman Islands under your daughter's name. $3 million moved over the last 2 years. Where did that money come from? Something flickered across Marcus's face. Not guilt, exactly, but recognition. He knew what Richard was talking about. My daughter has cancer, Marcus said, his voice rougher than usual. Stage 4. The treatments aren't covered by insurance. I've been putting money aside for her care. Money I earned through bonuses and hazard pay over 20 years of service. Money you earned? Richard's smile was vicious. Or money you skimmed from operations you were supposed to be securing? Money you redirected from shipments you were supposed to be protecting? Damien's hand moved to his weapon, not drawing it, just resting there, a reminder that violence was always an option. Diane, he said quietly, Verify the accounts. Now. Diane was already on her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. The room held its collective breath as she worked, the only sound the soft tap of her typing and Richard's labored breathing. Accounts exist, Diane confirmed after what felt like an eternity. Under the name Sarah Webb, $3.2 million deposited over 23 months. Deposits came from multiple shell corporations tied to our operations. Marcus's jaw clenched. I can explain. Then explain, Damien cut him off. Because right now it looks exactly like Richard says. You've been stealing from me while my father's corpse was still warm. I wasn't stealing. Marcus's voice rose for the first time, emotion cracking through his professional facade. I was taking what I'd earned, what your father promised me. He said when he retired, Leonard and I would get our share, a proper retirement package for 30 years of loyalty. Then he died, and you took over, and suddenly those promises meant nothing. My father made a lot of promises he didn't keep, Damien said coldly. That doesn't give you the right to steal from the organization. It wasn't stealing if it was owed. Marcus's control was slipping now, years of resentment pouring out. We bled for your family. Leonard and I, we were there when your father was nobody. We helped him build this empire from the ground up. We took the bullets, did the dirty work, eliminated the threats. And what did we get? A salary and a pat on the head. Meanwhile, you inherited everything. Lila watched this confrontation unfold with a growing sense of understanding. This wasn't about Richard's conspiracy. This was older, deeper, a wound that had been festering for decades. So you helped Richard try to kill me, Damien said. That was your solution? Murder? I didn't help him kill you. Marcus's denial was immediate and fierce. I didn't know about the sniper until after it happened. Yes, I took money. Yes, I was preparing for a future where you weren't in charge anymore. But I never agreed to assassination. That was Richard's play, not mine. Then what was your play? Damien demanded. You just said you were preparing for a future without me. What did that mean? Marcus went quiet, his face shutting down. Whatever he'd been planning, he wasn't ready to reveal it. Let me tell you what I think, Damien said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet. I think Richard approached you months ago with his plan. I think he promised you a better position, more money, more respect. And I think you said yes because you were tired of waiting for what you believed you deserved. But when it came time to actually pull the trigger, literally or figuratively, you couldn't do it. Because despite everything, despite your resentment, you still have loyalty to this family. Maybe not to me, but to what my father built. Marcus's silence was answer enough. He's right, isn't he? Richard said from his chair, and now he sounded almost amused. Marcus was supposed to help with the assassination. He was supposed to make sure your security had gaps, that the sniper had a clear shot. But at the last minute, he backed out, grew a conscience or lost his nerve, I don't know which. That's why the attempt failed, Damien. Not because of the girl, though her intervention certainly helped, but because Marcus couldn't follow through. Lila's mind raced back to that night at the Velvet Cage. The security positioning that had seemed slightly off. The fact that no one had spotted the sniper before her. Had those been genuine mistakes or deliberate sabotage that Marcus had corrected at the last second? Is that true? Damien asked Marcus. Were you supposed to compromise my security that night? Marcus's hands curled into fists. Richard wanted me to, said it would be clean, quick, that no one would trace it back to us. But I couldn't do it. Not to you. No matter what I think about how things have been run, I couldn't stand by and watch you get murdered. How noble, Richard sneered. You only wanted to steal from him, not kill him. What a paragon of virtue. Shut up, Marcus growled, and for a moment Lila thought he might lunge at Richard despite the restraints in the audience. Damien held up a hand, forestalling any violence. Victor, take Marcus to a holding cell. Not interrogation, just secure. I need time to think about this. Sir, Victor started, clearly uncertain. Now. Damien's voice cracked like a whip. Victor moved to comply, but Marcus spoke first. I know what holding cell means. I've put enough people in them. Just tell me one thing, Damien. Are you going to kill me? The question hung in the air between them. Two men who'd known each other for years, bound by blood and loyalty and now betrayal, facing the moment where everything either broke or bent. I don't know yet, Damien said honestly. Part of me wants to. Part of me understands why you did it, and part of me is just tired of all the lies and betrayal and games. He turned away, facing the wall. Get him out of my sight. I'll decide later. As Victor led Marcus from the room, the older man paused at the doorway and looked back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Your father was like a brother to me. You were like a nephew. I should have talked to you instead of letting Richard poison my thinking. That's on me. Then he was gone, leaving just Damien, Diane, Lila, and Richard in the interrogation room. Richard was smiling despite the pain he had to be in. 3 for 3. Everyone you trusted, everyone you thought was loyal, I corrupted them all. How does that feel, Damien? Knowing that your entire organization was rotten from within? It feels like you made a critical mistake, Damien said, turning back to face him. You assumed that because people had grievances, they'd be willing to kill for them. But Marcus proved you wrong. He took money, yes. He prepared for contingencies. But when it came down to actual murder, he couldn't do it. That's the difference between theft and treason. A distinction without a difference, Richard argued. He still betrayed you. But he didn't try to kill me. That matters. Damien walked closer to Richard's chair, looming over him. You wanted to burn everything down because you felt you deserved more. Marcus just wanted to secure his daughter's future. One of those motivations I can work with. The other? He straightened. The other is unforgivable. Richard's smile faded. What are you going to do with me? Exactly what we agreed. Prison, medical care, protection. You gave me information, and I'm honoring the deal. But you'll serve every single day of whatever sentence I arrange. No early release, no parole, no special treatment beyond basic health care. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cell thinking about how you threw away 30 years of loyalty for greed. And if I have more information, if there are others you haven't found yet, then you'll trade that information for privileges, better food, a bigger cell, books to read, but not freedom. Never freedom. Damien nodded to Diane. Get him processed. I want him transferred to the federal facility by tomorrow. Make sure they know he's our property, but their responsibility. As Diane made calls and arrangements, Damien walked out of the interrogation room. Lila followed, sensing he needed someone with him, but not necessarily to talk. They ended up in his office, that same space overlooking the city where the day had started. It felt like years had passed instead of hours. Damien poured himself a drink, scotch, expensive, the kind that normally required savoring. He downed it in one swallow and poured another. You're wondering if I'm going to kill Marcus, he said without looking at her. Lila settled into one of the chairs. I'm wondering if you know what you're going to do yet. I don't. He finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his face was stark. This job, running this organization, it requires absolute authority. People need to know that betrayal has consequences, that stealing from me, lying to me, working against me, all of it ends badly. It's the only way to maintain control. But, Lila prompted, hearing the unspoken word, but Marcus isn't wrong. My father did promise him and Leonard a retirement package. He did use them for the worst work, the most dangerous operations, and then treated them as expendable. And when I took over, I was so focused on consolidating power and cleaning up my father's messes that I never addressed those old promises. So you're thinking about honoring them now? Damien laughed, bitter and tired. Honor them? After he helped plan my assassination? That sends a terrible message. It says betrayal can be forgiven if you have good enough excuses. Or it says, you're not your father, Lila said quietly, that you recognize when the system is broken and you're willing to fix it, even when it costs you. He studied her for a long moment. You're very wise for someone who was serving drinks 3 days ago. I'm very observant. There's a difference. She leaned forward. Marcus didn't follow through with the assassination. He couldn't. That has to mean something in your calculation. If he'd actually gone through with it, if you died that night, then yes, unforgivable. But he backed out. He chose you over Richard despite his resentment. Because of loyalty to my father, not to me. Does it matter? Loyalty is loyalty, and you can build on it or you can burn it. But if you kill everyone who's ever resented you or disagreed with you or made a mistake, eventually you'll be surrounded by people who are only loyal out of fear. And fear-based loyalty doesn't last. Damien drained his second drink and set the glass down with careful precision. My father ruled through fear. It worked for 30 years. And how did it end? Lila asked. With people like Richard stealing from him, making plans for when he was gone, celebrating his death instead of mourning it? Is that what you want? To build an empire that everyone secretly hopes will fall? What I want, Damien said slowly, is to survive, to maintain control, to make sure that what happened these last few days never happens again. Then make changes, real changes. Not just purges and interrogations and fear, actually address the legitimate grievances, pay people what they're worth, honor old promises, create a system where people want to be loyal instead of having to be loyal. He laughed again, but this time it was gentler. You're describing a business, not a criminal organization. Why can't it be both? You already run legitimate operations alongside the illegal ones. Why not extend that philosophy to how you treat your people? Damien walked to the windows, looking out over the city he controlled through a network of fear and power and carefully maintained violence. Lila watched his profile, this man who'd been born into brutality and had never known another way. If I spare Marcus, he said finally, if I honor my father's promises and restructure how I run this organization, some people will see it as weakness. They'll test me. They'll think the new order means they can push boundaries. Then you make examples of them too, but you make examples of the right people, the ones who betray out of malice, not desperation, the ones who choose violence instead of communication. You can be strong and fair at the same time, Damien. They're not mutually exclusive. He turned to look at her, and something in his expression had shifted. When I brought you into this organization, I thought I was getting an observer, someone with good instincts who could spot threats. I didn't expect a strategist. I'm not a strategist. I'm just someone who spent her whole life on the outside looking in. I know what it feels like when the system is rigged against you, when the people in power don't care about fairness, only control. And I know that eventually those systems collapse. Not because of grand conspiracies, but because people stop believing in them. Damien's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression hardening slightly. Diane, they've finished processing Richard for transfer, and Marcus is asking to speak with me. Are you going to talk to him? I should probably make him wait. Let him stew in uncertainty for a while. That's what my father would have done. But that's not what you want to do. A small smile touched Damien's lips. No, it's not. They went back down to the holding area, but this time to a different wing. These cells were cleaner, less ominous, places where people waited for judgment rather than endured punishment. Marcus sat on a bench in his cell, head in his hands. When the door opened and Damien entered with Lila, he looked up with reddened eyes. I didn't think you'd come, Marcus said hoarsely. I almost didn't. Damien remained standing, maintaining distance. Talk. You said you wanted to. Marcus took a deep breath. I owe you the truth. All of it. Not just the parts Richard forced out. So here it is. Yes, Richard approached me 6 months ago. Yes, he promised me a better position, more money, recognition for the work I'd put in. Yes, I was angry about how things had been handled after your father died. And yes, I started skimming money for Sarah's treatments. But the assassination? He pitched it as a boardroom coup. Said we'd force you out, restructure the organization, give me and Leonard the retirement packages we were promised. I said I'd think about it. Then he got more specific. Sniper, clean hit, blame it on rivals. And I realized he wasn't talking about a coup. He was talking about murder. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. I told him I was out, but I didn't tell you what he was planning because I was afraid you'd kill me for even listening to his pitch. You were probably right, Damien said. I might have. So I tried to play it safe. Took the money I thought I was owed, kept my head down, hoped Richard's plan would fail or he'd come to his senses. Then that night at the Velvet Cage happened, and I realized how serious he was, how close it came. And I felt sick, Damien, because if you died, I would have been partly responsible for not warning you. Lila watched Damien's face, trying to read his reaction. He was good at hiding emotions, but she was learning his tells, the slight tension in his jaw when he was angry, the way his eyes narrowed when he was calculating odds, the small exhale when he'd made a decision. My father promised you a retirement package, Damien said finally. What exactly did that entail? Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting that question. $5 million. A house in Florida, paid in full. Medical insurance for life. And a guarantee that we'd be protected if any of the work we'd done ever came back on us. And he never put that in writing. Your father didn't put anything in writing. It was all handshake deals and verbal promises. That was his way. And my way, Damien said slowly, is going to be different. Here's what I'm offering. You and Leonard both get your retirement packages. The full amount my father promised, adjusted for inflation. Call it $7 million each. Houses wherever you want them. Medical insurance for you and your families for life, including Sarah's cancer treatments. All legitimate, all legal, all documented. Marcus stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You're serious? Completely serious. But there are conditions. First, you both retire immediately. No more active operations, no more enforcement work. You've earned the right to step back. Second, the money you already took for Sarah's treatments. That comes out of your $7 million. You don't get to steal and then get the full package. Third, you and Leonard serve as consultants for the next 5 years. When I need advice, when I need perspective from people who were there from the beginning, you provide it. No refusing, no hesitation. And fourth, Marcus asked, because there was clearly a fourth condition. Fourth, you never lie to me again. If someone approaches you with a conspiracy, you tell me immediately. If you have grievances, you bring them directly to me. If you see threats I'm missing, you speak up. Complete honesty, no matter how uncomfortable. Because this organization needs people who will tell me the truth, not just what I want to hear. Marcus's eyes were wet now, tears he was too proud to let fall. Why are you doing this? After everything I did? After I betrayed your trust? Why offer me anything? Because Lila made a good point, Damien said, glancing at her briefly. Fear-based loyalty eventually crumbles. But loyalty built on mutual respect, on honoring commitments, on actually valuing the people who've bled for you, that lasts. And I want to build something that lasts. Your father would never have made this offer. My father built an empire on bones and threats. And when he died, people celebrated. I don't want that to be my legacy. Damien extended his hand through the cell bars. So what do you say, Marcus? Do we have a deal? Marcus stood on shaky legs and gripped Damien's hand like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. We have a deal. And Damien, thank you. For Sarah, for Leonard, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. You deserve a chance to make this right. Don't waste it. As they walked back upstairs, Lila felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of who Damien Voss really was. Not just a criminal lord maintaining power through violence and fear, but someone trying to build something different, something better. That was the right call, she said quietly. I hope so. Time will tell. He paused at the elevator. What you said earlier about systems collapsing when people stop believing in them, where did that come from? Personal experience. I spent my whole childhood watching my mother run from one bad situation to another. And every time it was because she didn't believe the system would protect her, wouldn't give her a fair chance. So she kept running instead of fighting. I swore I'd never be like that. I'd stand and fight when it mattered. Is that why you pushed me out of the line of fire? Standing and fighting? I think it was just instinct, but yeah, maybe that was part of it. Not running when running would have been smarter. The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. For a moment they stood in comfortable silence, the weight of the last few days settling over them. I need to make a public statement, Damien said, as they rose back toward the main offices. Address the organization about what happened, about the changes moving forward. I want you there when I do it. Why? Because you're part of this now, not just behind the scenes, but publicly. People need to see that I value your input, your perspective, that loyalty and competence matter more than tenure or fear. That's going to make me a bigger target. I know, but I'll protect you. That's not just a promise, Lila. That's a commitment. The elevator opened onto the main administrative floor. People stopped and stared as Damien and Lila walked through together. Word had clearly spread about Marcus, about Helen, about the entire conspiracy being dismantled piece by piece. Diane met them in this hallway outside the conference room. Everyone's assembled, all department heads, all senior personnel. They're nervous. Good, Damien said. Nervous means they're paying attention. They entered the conference room to find it packed. Lila recognized faces from earlier meetings, plus dozens more. This was Damien's entire operation, gathered in one place to hear what came next. Damien took his position at the head of the table, and the room fell silent immediately. By now you've all heard about Richard Sterling and the conspiracy he led against this organization. Against me personally. I'm not going to pretend this doesn't represent a massive failure of our security protocols, of our internal oversight, of my own judgment in trusting people who didn't deserve that trust. He let that sink in before continuing. But I'm also not going to pretend that Richard's betrayal happened in a vacuum. He was able to recruit 12 people to his cause because those people had legitimate grievances. They felt undervalued, underpaid, uncertain about their futures. Some of that is the nature of our business, but some of it is on me. Surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lila doubted many of them had ever heard Damien Voss admit to making mistakes. So here's what's changing, effective immediately. First, compensation is being restructured. Everyone in this room will see detailed proposals for new salary structures, bonus systems, and retirement packages. Real retirement packages, documented and guaranteed. You give years of your life to this organization. You deserve security when you're done. More murmurs, these ones cautiously optimistic. Second, we're implementing new oversight and accountability measures. Not just for you, but for me. There will be regular reviews, opportunities to raise concerns anonymously, channels for reporting problems before they become conspiracies. I'm not interested in ruling through fear anymore. I'm interested in building something sustainable. Third, and here Damien's voice hardened slightly, betrayal will still have consequences, but those consequences will be proportional to the offense. Stealing because you're desperate for your daughter's medical bills is not the same as planning an assassination. One of those situations we can work with. The other is unforgivable. Learn the difference. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across every face in the room. Finally, I want to introduce someone who's going to be working directly with me on implementing these changes. Most of you know her already or know of her. Lila Hayes. In 3 days, she's proven herself more valuable than people who've been here for years. She sees things others miss. She acts when others hesitate. And she tells me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Those qualities are now the standard I expect from everyone. All eyes turned to Lila, and she felt the weight of their assessment. Some faces showed respect, others skepticism, a few outright hostility. She met their gazes steadily, refusing to look away. Questions? Damien asked. A woman Lila didn't recognize raised her hand. What happens to Marcus and Leonard? Are they being executed? No, they're retiring with the packages my father promised them. They'll serve as consultants going forward. Next question. What about the 3 conspirators who ran? Someone else asked. We'll find them, and when we do, they'll face justice proportional to their involvement. If they come back voluntarily and cooperate, we'll be lenient. If they stay in hiding, they'll be hunted. Their choice. More questions came, and Damien answered each one with the same direct honesty. No evasions, no corporate speak, just straightforward explanations of how things were changing and why. Lila watched the room's energy shift over the course of the meeting. The initial nervousness gave way to cautious hope, then something stronger. These people were seeing a different side of Damien Voss, and they were recalibrating their understanding of what loyalty to him might actually mean. When the meeting finally ended an hour later, people filed out with purpose instead of fear. Lila heard conversations starting, people discussing the proposed changes, debating whether this really represented a new direction or just temporary adjustments. Time would tell which interpretation proved correct. Diane approached as the last few stragglers left. That went better than I expected. People are talking about the retirement packages, the oversight systems. You might actually pull this off. Might, Damien agreed. Let's see how things look in 6 months. In the meantime, I want those financial restructuring proposals on my desk by Friday. And Diane? Your compensation package is doubling. You've been underpaid for years, and that ends now. Diane's eyes widened. Sir, Don't argue. You're worth it, and we both know it. Take the raise and use it to take a vacation. When was the last time you took time off? 2015, Diane admitted. Unacceptable. 2 weeks, fully paid, starting next month. That's an order. He turned to Lila. You too. Once things stabilize, you're taking time off. Can't have you burning out before you've really started. I don't even know what my job actually is yet, Lila pointed out. Director of Internal Affairs, Damien said promptly. Official title, official salary, official benefits. Diane will get you set up with everything you need. Office, assistant, budget, all of it. Lila blinked. I went from waitress to director in 3 days? You went from waitress to the person who saved my life and dismantled a conspiracy in 3 days. Director seems like a proportional response. He smiled, and it was genuine. Welcome to the executive team, Lila. Try not to look so terrified. I'm not terrified. I'm just overwhelmed, uncertain, wondering if you're in over your head, Damien finished. I know the feeling. I felt it every day for the first year after my father died. But you figure it out, you adapt, you survive. Over the next 2 weeks, Lila discovered exactly what being Director of Internal Affairs meant. It meant long days reviewing financial records, interviewing personnel, identifying weak points in security protocols. It meant learning the intricacies of an organization that operated across a dozen different sectors, some legal and some very much not. But it also meant having real authority. When Lila recommended changes, they were implemented. When she flagged potential problems, they were investigated. When she needed resources, they materialized. Damien kept his promise about protection too. Sarah became her constant shadow, along with a rotation of other security personnel. Lila's apartment, the real one, not the safe house, was upgraded with security systems that probably cost more than the entire building. Her life became a strange hybrid of luxury and danger, power and vulnerability. Marcus and Leonard formally retired in a ceremony that was surprisingly emotional. They handed over their badges and weapons, received their retirement packages, and made speeches about loyalty and family and second chances. Leonard cried openly. Marcus kept his composure until Damien hugged him, then broke down completely. The 3 conspirators who'd fled were found within 10 days. 2 came back voluntarily and cooperated fully. They received reduced sentences in minimum security facilities. The 3rd tried to run further and was eventually tracked to Mexico. He didn't come back voluntarily. He didn't come back at all. Richard served 3 months in federal prison before dying of a heart attack. Some whispered it wasn't natural. Others said the stress of confinement had simply been too much for a man used to luxury and power. Lila suspected the truth was somewhere in between, but she didn't ask. Some questions were better left unanswered. Helen lasted longer, 2 years before attempting suicide in her cell. She survived but was transferred to a psychiatric facility. Damien quietly arranged for better care than standard prison would have provided. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that some betrayals came from fear rather than malice. David Santos served his full sentence and was released 5 years later, broken and grateful to be alive. He disappeared into obscurity, working at a hardware store in the Midwest under an assumed name. Damien's people kept tabs on him, but he never caused trouble again. Through all of this, Lila and Damien developed a partnership that surprised them both. She brought perspective he lacked, the viewpoint of someone who'd lived outside power structures and could see their flaws clearly. He brought experience and knowledge she needed, understanding of how the criminal world actually functioned beneath its surface legitimacy. They worked late nights in his office, arguing over policy changes and strategic directions. They attended meetings together, presenting a united front on reforms that some people loved and others hated. They navigated assassination attempts, 3 more over the next year, with increasing efficiency. And somewhere in those long nights and dangerous days, something shifted between them. The professional respect deepened into friendship, and the friendship carried undertones of something more complicated. "We should talk about this," Lila said one evening, 6 months after Richard's conspiracy had been dismantled. They were alone in Damien's office, reviewing quarterly reports, and she'd caught him watching her instead of his spreadsheets. "Talk about what?" Damien asked, though his slight smile suggested he knew exactly what. "About how every time you look at me lately, you look like you're trying to solve a puzzle you can't quite figure out. About how I've started noticing details about you that have nothing to do with security assessment. About how this partnership is starting to feel like something else." Damien set down his tablet and leaned back in his chair. "You want me to tell you what I'm thinking? I want you to be honest. That's what we built this whole new system on, right? Honesty instead of fear? All right, Honest answer. I'm thinking that you're the first person in years who looks at me and sees something beyond the organization I run, who challenges me instead of just following orders, who makes me want to be better than what I was raised to be. He paused. I'm also thinking that getting involved with you would be complicated, potentially dangerous, and possibly the worst professional decision either of us could make. But, Lila prompted, hearing the unspoken word again, but I'm tired of making every decision based on strategy and control. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts, right? That's what you taught me. Lila stood and walked to where he sat, her heart pounding. My instincts say this is a terrible idea. Mine too. They also say I don't care. Neither do I. When he kissed her, it felt like the first genuinely reckless thing either of them had done in years. Not calculated, not strategic, just two people who'd found something unexpected in the midst of violence and conspiracy and choose to hold on to it. They pulled apart slowly, and Lila saw in his eyes the same mixture of hope and fear she felt herself. This changes things, she said quietly. Everything's already changed. We might as well change together. Over the next year, they rebuilt Damien's organization into something that resembled his father's empire only in outline. The violence remained. That was unavoidable in their world, but it became more surgical, more defensive. The fear remained too, but it was tempered with fairness, with actual rewards for loyalty, with systems that gave people paths forward instead of just threats for stepping wrong. Lila moved into the penthouse apartment Damien owned in the financial district, the same building where she'd hidden in the safe house that first night. She kept her old studio too, maintaining it as a reminder of where she'd come from. Sometimes when things got too intense, too complicated, she'd go there alone and sit in the silence, remembering the girl who'd served drinks and minded her own business. That girl was gone now. In her place was someone who'd learned to navigate power, to trust her instincts, to stand beside one of the city's most dangerous men as an equal partner rather than a subordinate. The Velvet Cage closed 6 months after Richard's conspiracy failed. Marco retired and moved to Florida. The building was sold to developers who turned it into luxury condos. Lila went to the final night of operation, had one drink at the bar where everything had started, and walked away without looking back. Some chapters ended. Others were just beginning. 2 years after the red dot appeared on Damien's chest, Lila stood in the conference room overlooking the city and addressed the assembled department heads. Damien sat to her right, Leonard and Marcus to her left, consultants offering their decades of experience to a new generation of leadership. The quarterly numbers are good, Lila said, pulling up charts on the main screen. Revenue is up 12% across legal operations, stable on less legal activities. We've successfully transitioned 3 major operations into legitimate businesses. Employee satisfaction scores, yes, we do those now, show 83% positive ratings, up from 62% last year. She let those numbers sink in before continuing. But we're also facing new challenges. 3 rival organizations have made overtures about potential partnerships. The DA's office has a new prosecutor who's making noise about organized crime investigations. And we have 2 major expansion opportunities that would require significant capital investment. Recommendations? Damien asked, playing his role in their carefully choreographed partnership. Accept the partnership with the Castellano family. They're stable, professional, and their territory doesn't overlap with ours. Reject the other 2 offers. Too much risk, not enough reward. Assign Diane to handle the DA situation through her political contacts, and move forward with the expansion into West Coast shipping operations. The numbers justify the investment. Around the table, heads nodded. No fear in those nods, Lila noted, just professional agreement with sound analysis. This was what they'd built. Not perfect, not bloodless, but better than what came before. An organization that valued competence alongside loyalty, that rewarded results instead of just punishing failures, that gave people reasons to stay beyond fear of what would happen if they left. After the meeting, Damien pulled her aside in the hallway. "You're getting good at this," he said, pride evident in his voice. "I had good teachers. Marcus and Leonard know their stuff. So do you. When you're not being deliberately cryptic to test people. That's called leadership development. I'm preparing the next generation." "Is that what you're calling it?" Lila smiled. "What would you call what we're doing tonight?" The dinner reservation at Merchant and Gray, the flowers being delivered to the apartment, the suspiciously light schedule you've cleared for tomorrow? Damien's expression shifted into something softer. I'd call that celebrating 2 years of partnership, professional and otherwise. Unless you have objections. No objections. But you're buying dinner. Director of Internal Affairs salaries don't quite stretch to Merchant and Gray prices yet. Noted. I'll add it to the compensation review for next quarter. They walked through the building together, past employees who greeted them with respect rather than fear, past security checkpoints that protected rather than imprisoned, past all the physical manifestations of what they'd built from the ashes of conspiracy and betrayal. Outside, the city sprawled before them, millions of people living their lives, mostly unaware of the criminal empire that operated in their midst, that controlled their ports and influenced their politicians and quietly shaped their world. Lila thought about the red dot that had changed everything, about split-second decisions that cascaded into months and years of consequences, about how she'd pushed a stranger out of the line of fire and ended up standing beside him as the person she was always meant to become. No regrets? Damien asked quietly, reading her expression the way he'd learned to over 2 years of partnership. Lila thought about the violence she'd witnessed, the compromises she'd made, the line she'd crossed from civilian to criminal the moment she accepted his offer. She thought about the people who died because of choices she'd influenced, decisions she'd supported, operations she'd approved. Then she thought about the families with health care they couldn't have afforded otherwise, about the retirement packages that gave aging enforcers dignity instead of abandonment, about the schools and hospitals and community centers quietly funded by profits from less savory operations, about an organization that had evolved from predatory to pragmatic, from feared to respected. Some regrets, she admitted, but not about this. Not about us. Damien took her hand right there in public where anyone could see. Once, that would have been unthinkable, a sign of weakness, of attachment that could be exploited. Now it was just the truth. They were partners in every sense that mattered. Good, he said simply, because I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. They walked toward the waiting car, toward dinner and flowers and a carefully cleared schedule, toward a future they were building together one decision at a time. Behind them, the building that housed Damien's empire stood solid and strong, its windows reflecting the setting sun. Inside, people worked and planned and built careers in an organization that had learned to value them instead of just using them. And somewhere in the city, in a building that used to be the Velvet Cage, a young couple moved into a luxury condo completely unaware that their home had once been the site of an assassination attempt that changed everything. The red dot was gone. The danger remained. It always would, in their world. But Lila Hayes had learned something crucial in the 2 years since she'd stopped being invisible. The difference between surviving and living, between hiding from the world and shaping it, between being a pawn in someone else's game and being a player in her own. She'd chosen to be a player, chosen to stand and fight instead of run and hide, chosen to push a dangerous man out of the line of fire and then stand beside him as an equal. And for the first time in her 25 years, Lila Hayes wasn't just surviving, she was thriving,